In Chronicles of the Seven-Colored World, Earth High School student Lee Kyung-woon is reincarnated as Abel in a very simple isekai chaos where he saves a ruined world. However, this is a ridiculous work with an absurd balance of power, where the survival of the main character occurs by miracle. It features psychopathic heroines who try to kill the main character at the slightest provocation. Secret organizations appear out of nowhere to destroy the world. Even supposed allies are eager to stab in the back no matter what, and all this has provoked dozens of vitriolic criticisms. However, there were readers who delighted in the sickening plot twists and their strange charm. This guy was one of those readers, but if he suddenly found himself in this crazy world, would he still be able to laugh like he does now? Suddenly, someone called out to Rudian, and the boy, holding swords and a shield on his back, ran towards the man who called him. A huge stone monster stood before him, casting a spell, and the boy realized that this was a tragedy. One hit and it will instantly turn into tomato juice. When the monster started throwing stones at him, he held his swords tightly and ran away. He handed Sir Eidos the sword and Sir Colin the shield, but both said he was too slow. These words really hurt the guy, and he began to mentally curse them. Suddenly, a stone hand flew towards him to strike, but a man appeared in front of him and protected him with a sword. With one blow, he cut off the monster's arm, which almost fell on the guy, but he was again covered by a man with a shield. The guy immediately forgot all his anger and thought that they were still appreciated. As always, Sir Eidos, with another blow, cut the monster's head in half. Part of the monster's face flew at the guy, and he, surprised, jumped to the side so as not to be hit. But he still rolled on the ground and scratched his face, which was now covered in blood. He had been living in this body for 3 years when he suddenly opened his eyes and found himself a 14-year-old orphan surrounded by strangers he had never seen. In this worst situation among complete strangers, the only consolation was that he had inherited the memories of Rudian, the original owner of the body. During the first month, he tried everything to return to Korea, but quickly realized that it was useless. Now, having grown up, he stands among other warriors. Suddenly, a man with gray hair appeared and addressed the knights of House Iskar, saying that the holy sword and treasures awaited them inside. He believes that they cannot be held back by such pathetic creatures. It was the young Lord Kalain von Iskar. This guy looks like the captain of the cheerleading squad, but in fact, it is Mr. Rudiana, and after this, the knight's blood pressure rose. The boy told him that such loud sounds could be dangerous, but the Lord replied that simple monsters could not do anything to him. Rudian almost started to cry because this psychopath was now working with him. If it had been one of those stories where he became the black sheep in a noble family, he would have been happy. But that's exactly what happened. He fell to the floor and started screaming. This world he was thrown into is far from ordinary, a crazy situation where the end of the world is supposed to happen 3 times in history. And here he is, just an extra appearing literally out of nowhere, in a world where the destruction of a city or a country is considered an insignificant incident. Huge humanoid bulls with axes in their hands attacked the warriors, and everyone prepared for battle. At this time, Rudian lost all trace of his former happiness, because he hoped that he could end it all and return to his hometown, but he found himself in the dungeon again. Suddenly, he received a slap in the face for not working well, and this reached the ears of the Count. Countess Louise stood before him, asking if someone as icy as he was not hired as Kalain's guardian to prevent such things from happening. If something happens to the Lord, she will definitely take revenge on this guy. Rudian stood and wondered if he should just leave here. Count Iskar's eldest son is the future ruler of this border territory and a notorious incompetent known to everyone around. After all this conversation, Rudian entered his shabby, modest room, and the troubles he had encountered before seemed completely different. He told the Lord that the young master and his friends had stolen 3 thoroughbred horses from Baron Hamar, and Lord Thera was demanding the return of the family heirlooms. He also said that Lord Bolton was standing at the gate with a sword and threatening to make him pay for his affair with his sister, but that he had been ordered to deal with this himself. Rudian said the Count was furious about Kalain's recent contacts with the criminal underworld. Kalain wanted to answer again so that he could sort everything out himself, but suddenly asked him to repeat what he had said. He began to walk nervously around the room, biting his finger, realizing that all this was very bad. How did Rudian find out all this? Rudian replied that this was already the 5th time in a month, and he had warned that nothing good would happen if he continued. Kalain had created problems while the guy was on a business trip. Why does he continue to do this when Kalain is involved with the villains of the criminal underworld that is like a cancer destroying the empire? It's not really that big of a problem since this is Iskar, and Kalain is practically the prince here. The real problem is that this scene and news reached the capital through a nobleman staying in the main castle. Kalain replied that he was a young lord and thought that if he communicated with them directly, everything would be fine. He believed that he would be able to find not only his subordinates, but also reach the main organization. In recent times, illegal slavery, drugs, and other criminal activities have been thriving in the border areas. The central government demanded strict control of the territory, but Iskar waved it off, asking not to interfere. However, now Kalain, the Count's son, has given them a reason, and they will definitely interfere. Rudian grabbed his head, not understanding what to do, because if something happened to the Lord, then he too would most likely end up underground. Just think, the crisis that was supposed to happen only after the start of the main story has already happened. This can't be happening. He will definitely lose his position as a young lord, and he should prepare to enter some monastery. In the capital of Navan, where the emperor's influence is enormous, such acts are punishable by beheading, and if that happens, his head will fly off too. There is only one way to safely overcome this crisis. After some time, Kellen and Rudian knocked on one of the doors and received permission to enter. And they saw a stern man with a bushy mustache at the table. It was Rickard von Iskar, the border count, to whom Rudian decided to tell about all the Lord's misdeeds. Next to him stood the personal knightly order Lionhearts under the command of the Count, whose commander was Derek von Hausen. Rudian was always grateful to Derek for his understanding. It was still a big mistake. He was causing problems when no one was watching him, but he should have handled it better. Rickard said he heard from the head butler that Kalain had caused quite a stir this time. He asked if Kalain knew what kind of people he had come into contact with. These men were part of one of the organizations that the 5 great knightly orders personally opposed. It seemed that everything was much more serious than Rudian thought. If the Imperial Knights Order had intervened, then the scale of the group this guy had gotten involved with exceeded his expectations. In this case, the House of Iskar found itself in great debt to the Imperial family, and the man told the Lord to prepare for a trip to the monastery. Not for life, but he had to think about his actions for at least 5 years. Rudian, without interfering in the least, watched what was happening, and everything went exactly as he had expected. According to his calculations, the main story of the Chronicle of the Seven-Colored World would begin in about 5 years, and by that time the continent would be engulfed in war and bloodshed. Kalain began to pray to his father to listen to him. He promised that he would earn enough merit to correct the situation and their family's position. Rickard replied that no matter what merits he earned, it would not change the current situation or stop the Empire's intervention unless something extraordinary happened. And then Kalain immediately mentioned the holy sword Daylight. Rudian immediately realized that the boy wanted to go into a dungeon that was too dangerous for a person of his level. He decided that Kalain had not only gone mad, but also wanted to die prematurely. Kalain asked if it wasn't because of the leak of information about the dungeon that these criminals from the Dark World appeared. If he returns the holy sword Daylight to House Delphian, they will surely receive help from the duchy. He desperately tried to find a way to survive because criminals would not have come all this way just to explore the dungeon. For example, in one episode, a dungeon appears where the evil god Apophis was sealed, and cultists who want to resurrect him begin to operate in society. Then they gathered an army of 100,000 people to defeat these cultists and confidently moved forward. But in the end, all these people became food for Apophis, and this event gave impetus to the spread of madness in the dungeons. Since then, before entering the dungeon, reconnaissance teams are always sent there, and the Count will never agree to this proposal. Rickard said that this dungeon is so complex that its danger level has not even been confirmed, and even if it is located in foreign territory, they will not be able to send their forces there. Kalain grabbed his father by the hand and confidently declared that he would definitely cope, and asked him to believe in him. The man and his knight looked at the Lord in surprise, silently. Rudian was sure that he would refuse because there was a risk of losing the heir and all their powers, unless the Count had gone mad. But suddenly the man agreed, saying that he would believe his son for the last time. He promised to give him 30,000 knights, including Derek, because once a loud promise was made, it must be kept. After this, he turned to Rudian and said that he was counting on his help in taking care of Kalain. The boy realized it was a disaster, but his father added that he believed in his son and was confident that he would not disappoint him this time. Kalain replied that he would definitely return with the holy sword. Rudian held back a tear, realizing that he was now in great trouble. And now they were already in the dungeon and fighting with a huge monster. Everyone was preparing for battle. From the very beginning, they came across a minotaur. And if it was already difficult at this stage, then how dangerous would the deepest part be? It was as if Derek had left his fate to the will of the gods. Rudian was at least glad that this wasn't the level of threat that featured in the main story, where high-ranking demons or ancient weapons usually appeared and had to be run away from. If it is an ordinary creature like a minotaur, then the dungeon is considered relatively passable. After killing the monster, they didn't know what to do next, because 3 years from the start of the main story, the continent would be devastated by demons, and 10 years later, humanity would be on the brink of extinction. Yes, there was still plenty of time, and until then, Rudian was going to save up a lot of money and hide in the mountains. The guy had built a good ending for himself, and so far everything was going according to plan. Kalain was confident that at this rate, they would not only return Daylight, but also collect all the treasures of the dungeon. But he was warned not to make too much noise, as it was dangerous. The Lord replied that there was nothing to worry about because he was not at all afraid of whatever might appear there. But suddenly there was a strange sound, and one stone fell on Rudian's head. Immediately, even larger stones began to fall from the ceiling. Suddenly, stone monsters appeared around the knights, and everyone realized that they were trapped. Knight Derek, unafraid, grabbed his sword and rushed forward. They would break through by force. He shouted that Group 1 should cut off the golems' heads and the rest should protect the young lord. Rudian held the blonde man's hand and told him that they needed to run in the right direction while hearing cries for help. The guy noticed that the golems were approaching them, but he didn't understand why. Together, they ran across the stone bridge, but the monsters did not lag behind. Suddenly, the knight Derek appeared behind them, swung his sword, and, together with the other knights, decapitated the golems. The man called out to the young master, but another monster suddenly appeared in front of him. Kalin, seeing that there was a golem standing behind him, began to call his friend for help. Rudian grabbed the guy by the collar and threw him aside to protect him from the blow. Now the two of them lay beaten on the floor, and the boy thought that he was just the young master's servant. If Kalayan died, he would die with him. But suddenly a huge stone hand grabbed him and threw him aside. Everyone watched in amazement as Rudian, with blood in his mouth, spat out and fell off the cliff. Rudian lay on the cold floor and could not understand why he did not die, how he remained okay, and whether he was really in hell. He stood up, began to stretch, and realized that his body seemed to be in perfect order. He thinks that just before his death, his prayers reached the universe, and now he is alive. It cannot be that he woke up like this. But this place seems unusual to him, and he cannot understand where he is. According to legend, this dungeon is located in the demon realm, created from mana from the negative dimension. And if it is magic, then there should not be such a bright light here. Suddenly someone said, "As he sees, the guy has awakened." And Rudian, turning around, saw in front of him a red creature with a huge eye. The guy fainted at the sight, and when he woke up, he apologized. They say the monster looked very scary. The monster said that everything was fine because he was the first person it had met in 1,000 years and thought that only beings with divine status could find this place. But today was an amazing day. Rudian noticed that this thing didn't even have a mouth, but it only made noises. The boy asked where he was, and the monster replied that it was the place where he was sealed. The ruins were created 3,000 years ago by the vanished civilization of Adora. Rudian had never heard of a civilization with that name in the original story, and he needed more information from this monster, so he started saying, "What do you mean he is the creature sealed in these ruins?" The monster replied that yes, it had no owner, so until now it had been in limbo. But the moment the guy entered this space, his presence awakened the monster. And then Rudian asked if the monster could tell him its identity. He replied that he was a 7th-generation artificial intelligence left by the Adora civilization, named Arcadia. This surprised the guy very much. It looks like the legacy of a demon god, and besides, it is named after heaven. The monster says he hopes this guy will become his master. If he refuses the offer, what troubles might await him? And just as he was about to ask what benefits awaited him, a monster's tentacle immediately aimed at his forehead. It pierced his forehead and said that in the current situation, this is the only ability that can directly help the owner. A table with his name, age, and strength stats appeared in front of him, and the guy realized that his stats were pathetic. But suddenly he saw something interesting, a status window. Arcadia said there are no quests here, like in the game system, but the guy can see the stats of others if his level is roughly the same. But he won't be able to see other people's stats if their levels are significantly different. Rudian realized that if they saw the numbers, it meant he shouldn't engage in battle because just having it was a huge help for survival. The monster said that originally, those who were not qualified could not get here. But if they were not gods, no matter what means they used, they had to be outsiders, and that was all. Rudian asked what it meant, and the monster replied that frankly, he didn't know what it was either. He thought it might be a god, but Rudian's existence destroyed all his assumptions. The guy asked how he knew he was an outsider, and it was determined by whether or not the core of his main body, sealed outside, reacted. This also means that he is a being with the power to retrieve the terminals that the monster's creators scattered. The first generation of AI prototype, the second generation collected, and so on up to the 6th generation. These are the 6 auxiliary A's that made him the creator. And every time Rudian retrieves a generation terminal, he can use that terminal's specialized ability. If all the terminals are collected, the monster's main body, sealed from the outside, will be fully activated, and it will be able to create a better ending. That's even better. And the guy agrees to this, saying that he will register as its owner. The monster replies that this is a wise decision, and Rudian thinks that the world will soon be plunged into chaos, so it is better to prepare for that time. Arcadia says that she would be happy to work with the person, and he responds in kind. The monster says that for now, since its main body is sealed, in its current state it is not at the level to properly support its host. But if they can restore the combat AI Shambhala together, it will be able to stand up to even a god. He heals a man with his tentacles and tells him not to doubt himself, but the guy thinks that he already feels like he was deceived. Arcadia asks what he plans to do next, and Rudian replies that he needs to return to his companions first. And once they overcome this crisis, they will think together about how to return the monster terminals. Luckily, Arcadia knew the entrances, exits, traps, shortcuts, and everything else. She was familiar with the entire geography of the dungeon. According to the monster, he was originally destined to crash into the floor and go straight to the afterlife. But luckily, Arcadia, who discovered his presence and woke up, managed to save the guy just in time, allowing him to survive. Rudian really almost died. Maybe this was also an evil trick of this damned author. And suddenly, when they were walking through the dungeon, the guy noticed someone's corpse and asked who it was. Not only did he break through the dungeon bucket, but he also reached this place. If this man was an adventurer, he must be one of the best on the continent. The monster explained that it was an adventurer who had invaded this place about 10 years ago. He had managed to evade the monsters and get this far, but lacking sufficient skill, he had been unable to open the entrance and had died after much effort. Rudian felt sad because this man had gone through hell to get to the deepest part, but there was a dungeon there that required a key, which he could not get. And then he climbed towards the body. The monster asked what he was doing, and the guy replied that he was going to take the remains. He feels sorry for this man, of course, but he needs to take what's left of him. Collecting things from the dead is a common thing for adventurers. The monster asked if they hadn't agreed not to call it grave robbing, but the guy replied that wasn't quite right. He pulled out a pocket watch. It looked like it would fetch a good price, maybe around 10 gold pieces. It seemed like he was a rather wealthy adventurer, and then he took out some kind of decoration on which a name was written. The dead man's name was Abel. Suddenly, the guy's hand began to shake and he jumped back, not understanding why this man was there. Abel Retstein is the name of the main character in the Chronicle of the Seven Colored World. Rudian immediately began to breathe heavily, trying to calm down because chronologically this should not be possible. Abel, real name Lee Kyung-woong, 19 years old, after failing the college entrance exam and searching for a truck, still achieves his goal and ends up in another world. He is reborn as the son of a provincial baron, receives the blessing of the creator god and a mythical artifact, the White World. He also receives the sacred sword of the god of order, Grandia, and begins his journey as a super-powered character. He crushes the demonic spawns. This is the opening plot of the Chronicles of the Seven Colored World. He couldn't understand what was going on then, because there was no evidence yet that this skeleton was the main character. The only encouraging thing is that the explorer's suit on the skeleton is from the northern kingdom of Ergun, and not from the Empire of Morian, where the main character was born. The skeleton is the height of an adult, while the main character was short and had an inferiority complex because of it. So for Abel, it seems too big. He couldn't understand what was going on, and the monster asked if there was any problem with that, since before the main story began, Abel was supposed to live the life of an ordinary child. He was worried that this place was not so far from the area where the main character lives. After he got out of here, he was going to use his own money to confirm the protagonist's location if necessary, so there was no need to panic. If by chance he does come into contact with Abel, these items could play an important role in establishing a connection with the protagonist. A beam appeared from the monster's eye, which began to show a map. There are monsters and traps on the straight path, so you need to turn right and go around. Rudian was shocked that the monster turned out to be quite useful. Suddenly he saw a crowd of warriors. These were his comrades, and he immediately ran up to them, starting to call out to the Lord. Suddenly, all the knights drew their swords and demanded that he stand still. Everyone pointed their guns at Rudian and said that if he came closer, they would kill him. He couldn't understand what was happening. Was it desertion, or was it all about the monster nearby? Derek didn't believe that the guy who fell off the cliff could come back alive and well, so he decided that it was a double who had come to deceive them. How could he remain safe and sound if he is not a double? The guy tried to justify himself. He explained that while falling, he somehow managed to grab onto a branch sticking out of the wall, and after going through a lot of trials, he ultimately survived, which made him incredibly lucky. Derek moved the sword closer to his throat, demanding silence, stating that it was all a lie, and ordered him to prove that he was Rudian within 10 seconds. If the guy doesn't prove it, he will die. The sword has already started to scratch his neck, and the guy was in complete shock. Then he shouted out Cynthia's name, because last time at the Harpin, Derek flirted with the saleswoman, Cynthia. He was then caught by the madam, who declared that she would return to her parents, while the man desperately clung to her waist. Derek immediately stopped the guy, asking how he knew about this, and the knights began to ask the commander if it was true. Rudian thought that he might die at the hands of his commander later, but now the only thing that mattered was to survive. Lord Cayman ran up to him, asked why he was so late, and said that he was bored without him, so he should return to duty. Derek said that no matter how he looked at the guy, his appearance had not changed, to which the Lord replied that he looked exactly the same as before. But that was the problem. If something was wrong, the commander still had to take care of it, because they were almost there and shouldn't waste their energy. Derek agreed with this, and they decided to move forward together. The master said that the hostility had not disappeared, and he felt that they had almost reached the deepest part of the dungeon. The boy noticed that no one seemed to be paying attention to Adi, and he explained that they simply couldn't see him. People from his world are unable to perceive its existence unless the monster itself chooses to show itself, and Rudian is an outsider and the monster's master. Considering it was only discovered now, it may not be a privilege, but a rare feature. This could mean that there are other people who have ended up in the Chronicles of the Seven Colored World just like him. Suddenly, a huge purple beam appeared in front of the knights, inside of which stood something. Everyone saw in its hands the very sword they came for. Taking a closer look, they realized that it was a death knight in front of them. Callan was overjoyed when he saw the holy sword of daylight, for the Duke's information turned out to be true, which means it must be Sir Samir Dran, who betrayed the Duke's family and fled 50 years ago. The creature with the rocky gaze declared that he was disappointed, because they were not the Duke's knights. Derek immediately ordered everyone to surround the Death Knight. He asked why he had betrayed the Duke's family and stolen the sacred sword, whether he had abandoned his knightly duty to end up like this. The monster replied that he saw no point in explaining himself to fools who were incapable of realizing the decay of their own foundations. With a wild grin, he created purple magic and released it towards the knights. Skeletons in armor and with weapons began to emerge from underground from all sides. The commander ordered no one to panic. The second and third detachments were supposed to hold off the small monsters, and the first squad was supposed to go with him to deal with the traitor. Without a drop of fear, everyone ran towards the monster, shouting, "Forward!" Rudian looks at the guy, can't understand what's wrong with him, why they're dying, because he looks even more energetic than before. The monster, whose bones are broken and whose limbs are cut off, immediately restores them and laughs. Everyone was shocked. Was there really no end to this monster's life force and mana? The man complained to the commander that the skeleton soldiers also regenerate, and at this rate they would run out of steam before they could kill the monster. Kalayan, with a smile on his face, tells everyone to hold on and not back down. Rudian asks Adi what he thinks about this, and the monster replies that there is an external force at work. The owner must also be able to see this and must try to use eye magic. As soon as the guy says this phrase, his eyes immediately light up red. A table of the monster's characteristics appears in front of him, and he sees its title, position, strength, and dexterity. He notices that the monster is currently connected to the dungeon's core and has temporarily gained immortality and infinite mana. And suddenly he notices a core in the same room. It is a magical bloodstone, which is often used as a dungeon core or mana storage. Since this dungeon was created by a 500-year-old mage, there is a very large amount of concentrated mana here, and therefore it is quite possible that they will die here unless a miracle happens. The stone's strength isn't that high, but the guy is unlikely to be able to get through the monsters. A couple of seconds later, some knight not far from him is fighting with skeletons, tearing them apart. Rudian understands that if he heads in that direction, the monster will definitely notice him, and given the current physical capabilities of the owner, the probability of his death is 90%. The guy decides he has no choice. The knight turns to the commander and says that, in his opinion, they need to retreat, because if they lose the young lord, they will no longer be able to cope with the skeletons. Derek replies that he doubts Kalain would calmly give the order to retreat, and orders everyone to protect the lord. Callan shouts that he will definitely take this sword, and the commander tries to think of a way out of this situation. Rudian runs towards him and tells him to look at the shining stone behind him, because it looks extremely suspicious. He immediately notices the magical bloodstone and can't believe he hasn't seen it before. He calls his comrades Arnold and Chris and tells them to choose the right moment to destroy the core. The man replies that this is impossible because if there were as many skeletons as before, it might be possible, but now their numbers and strength have increased to a level that they cannot ignore. Derek replies that in any case, it needs to be done literally now because their numbers continue to grow, and if they can't kill him here, they're finished. Now that the knights know they are targeting the core, his attention will be focused on only one place. At least among all of them, the guy has the best chance of success. Even if he can't control mana, he can at least use the weapon he took out of his bag. Together with their monster, they stand behind the wall and think that if Rudian is caught, then everything will be over. Derek turns to his comrades and tells them to move forward towards the core, and the Death Knight raises his sword and says that he will not let them pass. He swings his weapon, hits the floor, and a huge beam passes through. It splits the earth, creates a huge depression, and a bright light blinds everyone. Kalain is shocked that a shockwave has appeared, because this guy turned out to be a swordmaster, and he is ordered to run and retreat. But suddenly they notice that the escape route is also blocked by skeletons. Derek shouts at the knights that if they don't want to die, they should stand up, because even that monster probably won't be able to use that technique twice. He turns around and sees that most of his knights are lying on the floor, some wounded, some dead. He understands that this is the end, but as a knight of the Lionhearts, he cannot die just like that. Even if he dies, he must at least help the young master escape. But he is surprised when he sees the monster suddenly turn to the side. And together they see Rudian, with a huge hammer in his hands, walking towards the core. The guy is shocked that he was noticed, and Adi says that he is lucky that he has not been caught yet. But since he has already been caught, it does not matter now. The monster, in a rage, calls the guy a very impudent fool, and then he flies towards him and swings his sword to strike. But suddenly, Sir Derek appears in front of him and stops the attack with his sword. He tells the guy to go ahead and break that cannonball, and if he succeeds, he will forgive him for making him drink the water earlier. Rudian runs towards the target and shouts that he can do everything. He definitely can. He's so close now, swinging his hammer and realizing that he'll finish this thing off with one blow. But suddenly he freezes, and a voice says, "How dare the pathetic worm touch his heart? She is the great Dark Lord Castley Richmond, and she will punish the boy's sin of admiring his heart with death." Rudian realizes that this stone is not just the core of the dungeon. Richmond is a healer lord who appears at the beginning of the story, a nation-destroying mage capable of killing even a red dragon with a single death spell. His spirit says that he will give the boy a painless death, a deadly word. Rudian swings his axe to strike, and the spirit says that the word of death will ensure a quick kill. At that moment, the guy closed his eyes, was covered in sweat and shaking, but nothing happened. He sees in the reflection of the stone the face of a girl who is also completely surprised. She can't figure out why her ultimate spell didn't work and who this guy is. Maybe he's from the divine race. Rudian is also surprised that he did not die from the spell, and the girl in the core is trying to cast it again at this time. But that's impossible, because he must have a divine-level protective spell on him. He's from a divine race. Adi appears nearby and says that it was he who blocked the curse because this creature dared to cast such a low-level magic on its master. Even with his limited abilities, he can do this and doesn't understand why everyone is so surprised, because he is a pretty capable AI. Just think, he can nullify Castley's ultimate technique, how powerful this creature will become once it regains full functionality. The core orders the guy to stand still because it will open the spatial gate and come for him right now. Castley said for sure that this stone is blood magic, her heart, the only weakness of the immortal lich. I wonder if Castley knows that in an employer-employee relationship, Adi told the guy that the stone itself was quite weak. As Rudian swings, the stone screams to make a deal. If he keeps the life stone, he will get everything he wants. Anything but her life, her treasures, and all the magical knowledge she had accumulated over the centuries. Rudian clenches the hands that hold the hammer and says that he doesn't need it. Then the core calls the Death Knight and orders him to kill this guy right now and as quickly as possible. Rudian swings his hammer and says that he will destroy the stone faster than the knight can reach it. He screams for Castley Richmond to embrace this color. The girl's face in the crystal begins to scream. What about her ambitions? What about her desires? Just a couple of seconds, and Rudian shatters the core into many small fragments. All the wounded knights get up from the floor and are glad that he did it. And the Death Knight grabs his head and begins to scream in terrible pain. And his other assistants, the skeletons, begin to crumble, leaving behind red smoke and fragments. Suddenly, a tablet appears next to the guy, which says that he has acquired the essence of a high-level blood magic stone, and his physical abilities have increased significantly. He gains 20 mana and his eyes glow red. His strength, agility, and overall combat power have increased. This refreshing power flows through his veins, one of the reasons why he endured all this abuse as a servant, to obtain this mana. But only 20? Isn't that too little mana from a 500-year-old blood magic stone? Adi explains that the absorption rate is very slow, and as expected, he filtered out the negative mana scattered from the stone before allowing the boy to absorb it. The absorption rate is about 8%. He did all this because this energy is not mana, but demonic energy. If he had allowed the boy to absorb it completely, he would have received mana of a different order. But the monster did not think that Rudian would want to become a demon just for the sake of power, so he filtered it himself. The guy realized that he had almost screwed up, because the next thing that would have split after the blood magic stone was his own head, and suddenly his comrades appear behind him, calling him. If it looked like he was absorbing demonic energy, the next thing that would crack would really be him. Derek puts his hands on his shoulder and says that he really saved all the guys, and that he did a good job. Adi continues to talk about how he filtered the mana accordingly. Together, they return to the castle, where they are met by the Count, who tells his son that he has done well and has achieved success. Now, no vassal will doubt his abilities, because he is the future of the Iskar family. Kellen replies that with his abilities, it was natural. When he inherits his father's position, their family will truly be firmly on the ground. And the trophy is astounding. The line of carts seems endless, and the Lord has made a huge contribution to the family's wealth. In about a week, the Duke's family will send someone to appraise the sacred sword, and even if the Duke doesn't come himself, he will send someone they can't ignore. He tells his son to try to make a strong impression on whoever comes. With the success of this expedition, his name will spread throughout the Empire. Not only them, but even the family of Duke Delphian will be involved in this matter. So it will definitely happen. Rudian understands that if it becomes known that Castley was the dungeon's mistress, Kalain will become a knight of worldwide fame. But it is better not to reveal such things now, because it is difficult and could have consequences if he wants even more popularity. All that remains for Rudian to do is to continue to accompany the Lord. The Count tells his son that he now thinks he can send him into Soviet circles without fear, and immediately remembers Rudian. The boy kneels down, and the man says that Derek and the knights praised him highly, and he only did what was required of the young lord's escort. The Count says that this blow, dealt when the Death Knight wasn't looking, is something that would leave most people trembling and unable to move, and yet he is qualified to continue aiding Kalain. And he expects him to take care of this guy, and Rudian is very upset that he won't be able to leave the Lord. But then, having received a lot of gold, jewelry, and awards, he began to praise Kalain. A year's bonus and 10 days of paid vacation to boot. Why leave such a great job? Adi says he thinks what he stole will be more useful than the bag, but the guy replies that money is good, but what they brought, they can't use right now. He asks Adi, didn't the monster say that everything he took was imbued with magical power? And if they tried to cash it out, the magic tower would immediately be on their tail? Is that true? Adi did everything as the master ordered, and although it's a shame they can't take everything, they have some really valuable things now, so everything is fine. The most important thing for a mage is the spell books and the results of their research. which contain the work of their entire life, because the Richmond School was once one of the 3 best magic schools on the continent. And by selling just a few spellbooks, one can easily buy several castles. They need funds for the future, and even if they can't use them now, they will definitely come in handy later. The question remains, how did the knight who stole daylight become the Death Knight? This is part of the original story, so it is difficult to understand. Daylight was supposed to be brought by the protagonist's companion, the Holy Knight Crocs, when he returned from a trip to his home. But the details of how he obtained daylight were not explained as the story moved into the Heavenly Demon War arc. The author probably considered these to be minor details and cut them out, as it wasn't just greed that made him steal the sword. Most likely, he was closely connected with the demon race, since they would be the main enemies. This means that the demons will be the biggest obstacle to restoring the terminals, and then they will naturally have to destroy them. With Castley dead, the demons will have to act, as Castley was likely disguised as a court mage from the neighboring kingdom of Rohan. After the sudden death of such a person, the demons in the kingdom will definitely take some action, because given the future events, they must obtain the demonic sword. Adi asks about the magic sword. Isn't the holy sword better to use to fight the demon? Rudian replies that holy swords are difficult to obtain and their inherent holiness is perfect for attracting the attention of demons. And even looking at daylight, he wouldn't be able to obtain it alone even if he died and came back 10 times. Besides, in terms of stats, one of the best demon swords is right here in Iskar territory. If the demons can get their hands on it, their future tasks will become much easier, so they need Diablo's demon sword. The village of Baran, with a population of about 500 people, is considered a fairly large settlement in the territory of Iskar. Marco, the village chief in Iskar's lands, desperately begged the young man for help. Rudian, with an angry expression on his face, declared that he had only come here to relax and had not planned to do anything serious. Before returning Diablo, he wanted to take some time off in his home village. At first, he thought something serious had happened when he saw the headman rushing towards him. There were large tear stains on his face, and he begged the boy for help, explaining that the tax collectors were due to come the following week. Besides, the tax amount is not correct and the documents are a complete mess. And if this is not corrected, everything will remain as is, because only a guy can handle this. The man added that since Rudian was smart enough to work for the Count's family, he would quickly settle everything and asked to save him. The boy replied that he should have remembered everything he had taught him, or he could have hired a scribe at the village's expense. The headman replied that it would cost too much, and Rudian had no choice but to agree. Marco began to squeeze his hand and thank him, calling him the best treasure their village had ever produced. Today they would have beef that he had caught himself, and he would go to the warehouse for a minute to get it. Rudian remembered that he had once come to this village with nothing, and thanks to the village elder, he had managed to survive. Despite this, the text is almost free of errors, and it is said that knights with great physical strength and mana do not get tired. Even after fighting day and night for a week, he doesn't feel that tired, and maybe it's all because of the mana. Later, he handed the completed papers to the headman, who fell to his knees in admiration before him. Rudian has been working for 2 years now, so he could handle this kind of paperwork with his eyes closed. Marco said that tomorrow, when the sun sets, he should visit Rebecca. Rudian was very surprised and asked why her. It's because she took care of his house in his absence, and it would be impolite not to thank her. The guy noted that he had not asked her to do this, but she insisted that she should watch the house until he returned, and she actually went there every day. Because of her, 3 people in the village became infected with love sickness, and she continues to manage his empty house. Suddenly, Rudian heard a strange sound, grabbed his head, and collapsed to the floor. A red-haired girl with a dark aura emanating from her entered the room. She ran up to him and said that she had heard about his vacation. Rudian didn't understand how she got there, and the headman told Rebecca that he said the guy was tired and would come tomorrow. Rebecca apologized to the man, but still approached Rudian. She told him not to make such a face since they hadn't seen each other for so long. Her name is Rebecca von Bloodrain, and she's more suited to the big city than a village like this. A real beauty, out of place here. Moreover, she is sociable and has already received several confessions, and rumors have reached Rudian that some nobles have paid attention to her. If it weren't for the village headman's protection, something serious might have happened to her already, because usually a man who rejects such a woman is called a fool. But the guy doesn't want to get involved in this and die, because the real reason for his leaving the village and joining Kalan's followers was Rebecca. A demon eater who absorbs demonic magic and turns it into her own power? A blood witch. That's who Rebecca is. She is one of the heroines of this universe and the main character in the protagonist team. She is obsessed, whispers love to the hero, and then stabs him in the back. This is her true face. As her last name suggests, Rebecca is a demon hunter who inherited her parents' half-demon, half-human bloodline. Several years ago, she was almost kidnapped by those who wanted to get her blood, and then the guy, with the help of the headman, saved her along with a squad of Avengers. From then on, Rebecca felt a deep sympathy for Rudian, and after some time, she told him her full name. And then the guy immediately went to Count Iskar's house when he received the invitation. These emerald eyes and red hair are said to turn crimson when fully awakened. The girl flirted with him, asking why he was looking at her like that. Was he really in love? Becky's name was so common at first that he didn't immediately realize who she was, and when he did, they were already too close to distance themselves. Rebecca left, promising to bring salad and stew from home. Despite everything, the guy doesn't notice any signs of madness in her, although she's a ticking time bomb. The reason why he can't push her away coldly is because Rudian is an orphan, and it's hard for him to reject someone else's warmth. He has no particular attachment to the village of Baran because before serving in the Count's house, he was always looked at as an orphan. The only people close to him in this village are the village elder and Rebecca. If Rebecca hadn't awakened, he might have simply taken her with him. There were two men standing on the cliff, and one of them approached the other, calling him captain. He said he felt like they had gone too far and didn't even realize what they were doing. The captain replied that they simply had to follow orders. The man didn't understand if these were too extreme orders, since they were ordered to infiltrate Iskar's territory disguised as bandits. They are tasked with finding a Grand Master, or a 9th class mage, or someone who has made a contract with the Spirit King. But if such a person exists, they have likely been sent to their deaths. He had never received such a ridiculous order before, They must find a powerful man on the border, which in itself is a miracle because they have not been caught yet. The captain realizes the absurdity of the order, even if it comes from the highest command. Just 3 days ago, the military commander gave the order to explore the territory of Iskar. It is necessary to find out whether there's a great 9th class mage there, or someone who has made a contract with the spirit, and why this particular area has become the object of attention. A few days ago, he received information that a junior member of the Iskar family had returned Duke Dilfian's sacred sword. And less than half a day later, the order was given to begin the search, which looks suspicious and makes one wonder about the connection between the events. 3 days later, Rudian was sitting on the street of the village, and Rebecca was standing next to him. He could not understand what was happening because an alarming atmosphere reigned in the village. Rebecca said that bandits have recently started appearing in the southeast of the village since Baran is located not far from Iskar. If this were a poor or remote area, this might be understandable, but for something like this to happen in such an important borderland is a worrying sign. Typically, these are eliminated by nearby patrols, but Rebecca clarified that the bandits' presence has not yet been confirmed. Since yesterday, travelers have been crossing the border, stopping in the village to warn the locals. The headman didn't tell him anything about it, but it's already late today, and it seems that he has become much more careful. This is too strange a coincidence to be considered a mere accident. In the 3 years he's been here, the guy has never seen bandits roaming freely in the borderlands. Have the bandits really started to act? 2 days later, not far from Iskar, Rudian discovered some kind of cave, and it seems that this was the one described in the original story. It is easy to find compared to other hidden keys or locations that are only accessible during solar or ionic eclipses. The monster said the place was relatively well hidden, but not completely invisible. The sword from the ancient era, which contained the ancient demon king Diablo, existed even in the early stages of civilization during the War of the Second Age. It was so long ago in human history that there are almost no records left, and in terms of rank, it is comparable to the Holy Sword of Grandia and not even remotely inferior to it. Originally, this weapon could only be obtained after passing the most difficult trials, but now this sword is stuck in an empty cave and is not guarded by either guards or monsters. The reason why it still remains without a master is because anyone who tries to touch it will be cursed and disappear without a trace, even if it is the great dragon that was resurrected before the start of the main story. It will be a catastrophe of such magnitude that it can change all of history, and if Rudian manages to control its power, he will have enough power to rewrite the course of events. The main thing is whether Adi's defensive ability can help, whether he is confident that everything will go well, and whether he can resist the curse of the demonic sword. This is a demonic sword, one of the demon kings who participated in the Great Demon War. Adi did not take part directly in the Great Demon War, but he knows the general level of the gods who fought then. He can't be sure until he sees the demonic sword himself, but given its weakening by the seal, the monster believes it can protect its master. Rudian wondered how long ago this sword had been created. The Great Demon War took place at least 10,000 years ago, and Adi claims that the ruins where the sword was sealed have existed for around 3,000 years. It may even be an older civilization than is thought, and it existed long before 3,000 years ago. Adi suddenly announces that the place they were looking for was right in front of them. At first glance, Diablo's demon sword looked like an ordinary sword without any decorations. In fact, it was precisely for his simplicity that he was chosen as a monster. Rudian shouted that he could handle it and pulled the sword out of the stone, after which its blade began to shine. Suddenly, he found himself in a strange place without clothes, where everything around was gray grass and a wall covered with gray streaks. Rudian didn't understand where his clothes had disappeared to, and what's more, he couldn't move his body. The wall began to crack even more, and black liquid began to flow out of it. Adi appeared, asking his master if he was okay, as he looked unwell. The monster explained that it was an instant mental corruption that was trying to take over the guy's mind. And about 5 minutes passed until she weakened, and Rudian thought that the sword curse was just demonization. That's right, whoever wields this sword inherits a portion of the ancient demon king's mind and power, and begins to transform into Diablo himself. The problem is that this force is so great that no human body can withstand it and is destroyed. Thanks to Adi, he managed to avoid becoming a demon king and can still wield the sword. This is enough for Rudian, even if he cannot unleash his full power due to the curse. Even Diablo himself would be able to surpass the power of a normal magic sword. Suddenly he began to look around, hearing a strange sound. The sword spoke, saying that it was the first time he had met a man in 1,000 years and that he too would eventually die, unable to overcome the curse. Huge black hands came out of the sword, and he said that he was bored being locked up here. If there was even one creature capable of resisting the sword's curse, he would help the new owner without hesitation. But this is impossible because even the Dragon Lord could not withstand him. Archangel Uriel told him that his time would soon come, but the wait had become so boring that he might die of boredom. He told the man not to give in to the curse and to hold on because he could succeed if he remained strong. Rudian stopped him, saying that he was being too noisy. The wall in front of him was already almost completely covered in black liquid, and the sword wondered if the man was still alive. No human had ever lasted more than 30 seconds in this state before, so was it possible that time had been distorted by the seal? It didn't take him 10 seconds to ask the guy if he was okay, and he replied that he was indeed fine. But this cannot be, because this curse was created by the archangels themselves with the help of complex rituals, and even the gods could not survive it. If this is true, then Rudian has overcome his transformation into a demon king, and then the power should feel completely different. After waiting a bit, he said that yes, the curse really did not affect him at all. He raised his huge hands, pointed at the boy, and said that he was worthy of receiving the help of the sealed demon king. He offered him a contract, not a cursed contract, but a direct blood contract, so that he would gain power and wreak havoc without any payment. Such an offer had not been made since the creation of the world, and now, with his overwhelming status, he could do whatever he wanted. Rudian replied that although he was being offered power without a price, wouldn't it be worth mentioning that with the advent of the Age of Myth, he would be able to abandon the sword? The creature in the sword was shocked at how he knew this. The contract he offers was sealed with the Demon King Diablo, and as soon as he is released, the contract becomes invalid. Later in the novel, the demon that acted as the hero's team's magical energy battery before the mythic war was willing to sacrifice its powers. But once the seal was removed, Diablo escaped, and the old one dealt with Crocs. The creature could not understand who was standing in front of it. Rudian, with a cheerful expression on his face, offered him a bet. He must use all his strength to try to dominate the person, and if he wins, the person will become his slave. But if the creature is defeated, then for the next 100 years it will give him all its strength and wisdom, even after the onset of the Age of Myths. The sword began to laugh loudly and then said that the man does not know his place. Even if he managed to avoid the curse, he is too self-confident. He would like it to be the pride of a true demon king, and so he agrees to 100 years. He waited 10,000 years, and 100 years is nothing to him. There is no reason to refuse. Rudian was glad that he gave in, because if there had been no time limit, Diablo would have come out in 10 years as promised, and then he would not have agreed. But the time limit means he's likely to accept the offer. Rudian said that everything would be fine if he could get rid of the creature's dominion. Using the sword before the seal is released will be safer, but using it fully now will reduce the enormous losses in the Second Great Demon War. And suddenly Rudian woke up on the cold floor. He stood up and saw that he was lying on the sand, and in front of him lay the ocean, still in gray tones. Could his assistant have been mistaken? Because if the mental corruption had won, he would not have been able to think clearly, and if he had won, he should not have seen this king. Suddenly he turned around and saw a huge demon emerging from the water. Diablo's true form was described as being so gigantic that it could cover mountains, but he turned out to be smaller than expected. The demon came up to him and said that everything that was happening was amazing. Could it be that before him stood a man who had received a hidden blessing from the gods? Rudian thought he meant Adi, since he had clearly said that he was an artificial intelligence created by a civilization, and given his power, it would be strange if someone mistook him for a god. The demon noted that it seemed that even this blessing could not fully protect the boy since such an imperfect connection had already appeared. The fact that this scene is unfolding right now made me wonder if it meant failure or just an ambiguous situation. The demon asked what the guy was going to do since all the monster's powers were sealed, and in exchange he temporarily lost the protection of this god. Rudian, without hesitating for a second, ordered him to attack. If he can't predict what will happen next, then it's better to act and see if it works or not. Diablo noted that this was an impressive display of courage. However, he added that he was not going to fight, because it was not about him, but about the guy. The demon laughed, realizing that he had wavered from the single word, and admitted that the offer of a duel with a demon was truly arrogance worthy of a demon king. Diablo sensed an unusual flow of fate coming from the man and remarked that it would be very exciting. Rudian, perplexed, asked what exactly this flow of fate meant. The demon replied that this meant he was willing to cooperate and called the guy a child. The demon had a feeling that watching this guy could be quite fun. He decided that by dominating it right now, he would be able to call not only him an enemy, but also the creature that was watching them. Rudian was startled when he noticed the eye in the sky and wondered if he had fallen under Diablo's influence when he let his guard down. The being in the sky apologized, explaining that the demon's power was greater than expected, and that was why the treatment had been delayed, but now the boundaries would be lifted. A couple of seconds later, Rudian was already in the same place where he had been before. He looked at the sword in his hands and said that for the next 100 years, the monster contained within it must take care of it. The guy thought that everything ended well. At least he laid the foundation to prepare for the coming disasters. After some time, he continued to practice using the sword, drenched in sweat. Fishing watched this and wondered why he was training again, since it seemed like he was done with fencing. Rudian replied that he had found new hope because with Adi and Diablo's mana, he could take a new path, and not just live as an NPC. In this world, wars are waged even against aliens, so his personal stats are no less important than his equipment. He wondered if he should join the knight training again, since with 20 mana he was roughly equivalent to an average knight, but awakening magic and actually using it were two different things. He knew that if anyone found out that he had started using mana, there would be problems, and he couldn't let that happen. However, even if he trains alone for an eternity, he is unlikely to achieve mastery in fencing, and is there no better way? Robocar reminded him of yesterday's conversation and asked if he was going to discuss further actions with the headman regarding those bandits. So far, nothing unusual has happened, but reaching an agreement with the main estate is a separate issue, and they should at least prepare minimal measures. Of course, it would be best if nothing happened, but if it had to, he could handle them himself, so everything would be fine. Suddenly, he noticed something strange and wondered if it could be connected with Rebecca's awakening. Since he prevented Rebecca from being kidnapped, there is a possibility that the original story was distorted. While he couldn't stand aside out of sympathy, the butterfly effect could prove fatal. Because he was staring at Rebecca too hard, she asked if everything was okay. He remembered her real form, but remained silent. Two people were walking through the forest, and a girl was walking next to a horse while it was raining. She turned to her companion, whom she called Uncle, and said that the sacred sword Daylight, which had disappeared 50 years ago, had been found. The man replied that they were not so weak as to stake their fate on one semi-vital relic. The girl asked if Daylight wasn't one of the most famous divine artifacts in the Empire, even if it didn't belong to the God of Order. Uncle agreed and added that even if the search took time, they had to assemble a worthy team. The girl said that his presence alone was more than enough to maintain order in the Iskar family. The man noted with regret that if she had not dragged him into this expedition, he would not be suffering now. Together, they crossed the border of the Iskar kingdom. At this time, the village elder commanded the village, ordering the palisade to be restored, proper traps to be set, and blades to be sharpened. He swore that they couldn't do everything properly and wanted to die altogether. He said that if anything was unclear, you should ask Rudian because he was a veteran who had gone through a lot in the service of the young lord. The people were unhappy because, in their opinion, he wanted them to obey the orders of a man with a dirty past, who had once asked for mercy in the headman's house and now had climbed too high. Adi asked his owner if he was okay, and the boy replied that he wasn't quite okay, but he had heard something like this before, so he didn't care. The monster noticed that his facial expression said the opposite, and that these negative emotions suited him very well. The sword added that despite being its supposed user, being mocked by such trash was unpleasant, and a little demonic energy could turn them into low-grade monsters. Rudian stopped him immediately, and the sword complained that it was a shame because it could have been a good spectacle. Rudian noticed that the demon seemed to be trying to use his power by accident, and he replied that he was just bored. Suddenly he was called, and the headman said that the man he was looking for was here. It turned out to be a member of the Information Guild whom he had asked to find through the village elder some time ago. They entered the house together, and Rudian was surprised to hear that Khanzan had been attacked, and that the news had probably already reached the ears of Count Iskar. These were not simple bandits from the Empire, their true nature must have been different. Most likely these bandits are disguised soldiers of the Kingdom of Rohan, who are currently hiding in the nearby mountains in order to attack when the garrison retreats. 3 territories have already been subjected to such attacks, and large forces will probably soon be assembled to suppress them, so the problem will be resolved quickly. However, the real problem is not the bandits, because Rudian could have dealt with a cavalry detachment. The problem is that there might be demons or their minions among them, and that would be a whole other level of threat. Adi interrupted the master's thoughts, reporting that people were already approaching. Rudian realized that he had no choice, took the sword and put on his coat. He went outside and asked the sword for some help. The demon said that it would be a great entertainment to test the strength of the descendants of the current era and agreed to help. However, he warned that even if he lent him the power for free, Rudian's body was now too fragile to withstand it. If he had become a demon, as the sword suggested, everything would have been much simpler. But if he became a demon, he would simply be hunted down by the protagonist or a secret organization, and that's the problem. Suddenly he was called and turned around to see Rebecca soaking wet from the rain. Rudian noticed that she looked very worried, and perhaps her demon eater blood was reacting to what was happening. He walked up to her, put his hand on her shoulder, and told her not to worry because he would soon sort everything out in return. The headman, along with the rest of the villagers, stands in the rain with spears in their hands, and in front of them are their enemies. Marco shouts that this territory is under the jurisdiction of House Iskar, and they have already confirmed through the Information Guild that these people are not just a gang of marauders. The man with the scar on his face, sitting on a horse, said that this kind of information from the Empire was quite good. They made too much noise, which is why they were quickly discovered, and the Iskar army will soon arrive. They have been suffering from the damned order for several days now, so they intend to take compensation from the villagers. Rudian looks at the man with his magical eye and realizes that he is at the level of a knight apprentice. His stats are not very high and he has no title. Position: Commander of the 3rd Squad of the Cooper Special Cavalry Unit, Rohan Kingdom. Judging by the smaller number of people than expected, these are the ones who attack the nearby villages and hills, and fighting here would be suicide. Rudian covers the village elder and orders everyone to retreat. The warriors on horseback do not understand what is happening and where the villagers are heading. The squad commander immediately gives the order to pursue the fleeing residents, and Bernard Calcio himself rushes in pursuit of the headman. He swings his sword and is about to kill the man, but Rudian stands in his way. Bernard is surprised that his strike was blocked so easily and realizes that the sword is imbued with mana. He notices that the guy has a very good sword for a young man, which means he has recently had a lot of luck with his catch. Rudian starts to run away at a rapid pace, shouting out questions about who decided he was anyone's rightful prey. A bright passion instantly appears in the man's eyes, as if a hunt he had been waiting for a long time had begun. He simply cannot understand how anyone could dare to escape from the cavalry, which is known for its ruthlessness. At this moment, literally in a matter of seconds, several of his soldiers are seriously wounded by his sudden arrows. Bernard suddenly raises his head and angrily calls the archers dirty and vile rats. He doesn't understand how long they've been preparing, because the archers are already standing on the tower with weapons in their hands. Rudian is genuinely amazed that the man only realized what was happening now when it was already too late. Bernard realizes that the village was evacuated in advance, since there is no longer a single sign of life in it. He orders everyone to be killed, believing that the enemy has few archers and can be cut down one by one if one is careful. These people are not Avengers at all, but ordinary civilians, and no matter how many of them there are, they will not be able to defeat the knights. Suddenly, one man falls unconscious in front of the captain and begins to fall from his horse. Rudian runs up to him and cuts off his head with his sword. People realize that the guy doesn't know how to handle a sword, but he was still able to block the captain's blow, so he shouldn't be underestimated because of his age. The headman orders to shoot at the knights and lure them deeper into the village. The villagers follow the order and shoot several arrows at one man. One knight asks the captain what to do, since the enemies are clearly prepared and may be waiting for an escort detachment. Bernard replies that they are just ordinary villagers and no escort is required to deal with them. The headman and Rudian hide among the buildings, and the man asks the boy if he is sure that everything will be okay. Rudian replies that their numbers need to be reduced as much as possible because, even with the difference in skills, using the terrain they have a chance. The elder stops worrying because now the guy will definitely not die, although before he would not have been able to cope with even 1 or 2 soldiers. He was finally able to stand firmly on at least 1 foot in this damned world. At this time, Rebecca was exhausted and falling off her feet, but she tried to move on. If she goes, she will simply stand in Rudian's way. She remembers how the rituals were performed on her, and therefore she must restrain herself. She remembers the guy, and suddenly a dark hand appears, grabs her face, and her eyes light up. She goes crazy and realizes that she wants to eat. At this time, Rudian is fighting, and if he used the demon's power, he would cope easily, but this power is uncontrollable. If used recklessly and it gets out of control, the entire village could be destroyed. The knight fighting the guy realizes that he can control mana, and Rudian immediately pierces the man through and through, breaking his armor. At this time, the captain and the knights rush forward, but suddenly they stop, seeing the traps. "These are traps meant for monsters, but they are perfect against knights," says one of the villagers. The captain curses them for turning this area into a complete hole. This is the same village where ambushes used to be set up and heads chopped off as a lesson. Now the residents act on their own. He doesn't understand why these people resist so desperately. The headman is happy because the spirit of the village is alive, and how could they think that they could destroy it with these pathetic soldiers? This village has the largest number of soldiers, and even ordinary residents have learned basic spear techniques. Moreover, Marco is a former centurion, expelled from the army for misconduct. A tough guy, capable of dealing with even special forces fighters. Rudian points his sword towards the captain and says that everything will end as soon as the villagers kill all the enemies. Bernard realizes that this guy is not someone to be underestimated due to his young age, as he is already capable of blocking mana attacks. The man asks if he is really the heart of this village because it is hard to believe that he has already awakened Vagi. As a sign of respect for him and his village's desperate struggle, he decides to tell the boy one fact. This village was originally the place where Cooper's squad was going to complete their strategy. If they go further, they will still end up at the main Iskar estate. So they decided that the village was their limit, and Bernard himself was just a commander, not a captain. This means that these knights are not the only ones attacking the village, and the victory of the inhabitants is possible thanks to the triggered traps. But if even one more squad appears, this place will definitely become a wasteland. And it is not a fact that they will be able to hold out. Of course, reinforcements from the main Iskar estate are already close, but the question is whether the inhabitants will hold out until they arrive and whether Rudian should use Diablo's power. He immediately realizes that this is not the worst-case scenario, and first he needs to deal with the current enemies. Suddenly a man approaches Bernard and he happily greets the captain. On the horse sits a man with a huge body, crazy eyes, and an inhuman appearance. Rudian activates his eye and sees that it is Alec Huma, 145 years old, captain of the Special Cavalry Unit Cooper, Kingdom of Rohan, minion of the Demon King Iblis, half human, half demon. Rudian realizes that he is a demon's lackey and is immediately met with the man's terrifying gaze. The only good thing was that this guy came alone, without other companions. His base stats completely overlap with Rudian's, and the numbers in parentheses represent the power he gained as a minion. Such an opponent is only a mid-level minion, not even a top-level one, and one wonders if Rudian can handle him. As a devoted reader of the original story, the boy had a rough idea of the power of the said demons, but seeing it in reality was a completely different matter. Bernard apologizes to the captain and says that it was his fault that they lost a lot of people. Alec angrily calls them idiots and punches Bernard in the face. The blow is so strong that Bernard's head is torn off and flies to the side. Rudian appeals to the headman with a request to escape immediately. The headman calls the rest of the residents and also tells them to flee. He worries about Rudian, but he knows from experience that he won't be able to cope, and he can't look after him now. In his mind, he asks Rudian to return alive, so they are left alone. The half-demon and Rudian look into each other's eyes. Alec wonders why the guy is bothering them, since they should have contacted him in advance. Perhaps everything happened too quickly and the orders didn't have time to reach them. But even in that case, this is their territory. Rudian doesn't understand what the man is talking about, but the captain says that he shouldn't underestimate his feelings or be hypocritical. Doesn't he realize that he serves the same great beings as the captain? Because he is a minion of the Demon King Iblis. Alec asks his name and inquires who he serves. Rudian realizes that the man mistook him for a henchman like himself. It's probably because of the sword, which has demonic energy that was obtained as proof of the contract with Diablo. Perhaps the man sensed this and decided that Rudian was his ally because he has very sharp instincts. Since things have come to this, it's worth buying a little time so that the headman and the others can escape. And he introduces himself. Alec asks why he doesn't have a last name and whether he's not a nobleman, and wonders who he serves. Rudian understands that this is logical because demons who infiltrate human ranks are especially meticulous in choosing their minions. To dispel suspicions, he claims to serve Lady Asmodeus. The man understands that he serves the goddess of lust and indulgence because only the allies know this name. The demon in the sword wonders how such a non-entity as Asmodeus can be a goddess, and what happened to the hierarchy in the demon realm. The man says that Rudian looks rather weak, so it is logical that the goddess favors him, which is why the guy mentioned her, because her only criteria when choosing minions is youth and attractiveness. He says he never received any instructions from her, but now he finds himself on her territory. Alec replies that the situation is complicated, and perhaps the information did not reach here in time, unlike in other regions. Rudian wonders where he was sent from if he still hasn't received any news. The captain replies that this place is quite far away, and perhaps that is why the letter did not reach the end of Belstad. Rudian smiles, because he knows the name of the Marquis Belstad very well and understands that in front of him is a demon's puppet. He says that everything is clear now and remembers Count Gus von Belstad, who has now become a marquis. He was such an insignificant figure in the original story that Rudian even forgot about him. So the chaos caused by Castley Richmond's death was to blame, which is why someone as strong as Alec was sent here. The captain asks where the guy got his murderous intent, and he replies that it's nothing special. After all, there is nothing strange in the fact that he is preparing to fight the enemy. Alec asks if he seriously thinks he can resist him with such a paltry force. This power is not granted by grace and is not created by his own hands. He is not his equal. Rudian understands that he does not have any gifted powers at all, and his knightly abilities are much inferior. But this is only when comparing the basic characteristics, and he activates his sword. The demon in the sword warns that the guy's body will only withstand this power for 1 minute. Otherwise, even God will not save him. Rudian replies that he knows about this and wants to test how strong this Iblis's minion is. He jumps up and swings his sword at the enemy. Within a second, he cuts through the armor and wounds the man in the chest. The man screams in pain as he receives several more blows. His hand is cut off, it flies off to the side, and he doesn't understand why he can't ignore it. Rudian says that perhaps he feels like his soul is disintegrating, because the demon blade is not just a physical weapon. The reason Diablo's magic sword is considered top tier is because it becomes a key weapon later in the story. The demon's power does not simply cut the body, it damages the soul and divine essence, capable of injuring even immortals. Rudian says that he initially wanted to risk his life in close combat, but it was good that the enemy let down his guard. The captain asks if he really thinks he can win with this and swings his fist. But the blow does not reach the head as it is stopped by the barrier. The man does not understand why his power is being absorbed into demonic energy, because such power could not be given by the goddess of lust. The demon in the sword states that it is obvious, and how dare he compare him to such small fry. Alex screams that this is impossible because he is a berserker, endowed with the power of Lord Iblis and cannot lose to such a brat. Rudian realizes that he has very little time left and delivers several more powerful blows. With his final blow, he pierces the man's chest even though a battle using demonic energy usually pollutes the environment. A side effect is monetization, but another reason Diablo is so useful is his ability to absorb demonic energy. By absorbing it, he does not pollute the surrounding space and does not risk being detected. Rudian says that one day he will cut off the heads of every damned demon in the kingdom of Rohan. Alec begins to dissolve and calls the guy a traitor, but Rudian cuts him in half with one blow. Everything that remained of the monster immediately crumbled into black dust. Rudian is shocked to see an entire character being sucked into the sword, realizing it is indeed a demonic weapon. The demon replies that he considers this fortunate because if even the slightest trace of demonic energy remained, it would be a problem. Sword asks the guy why he sent the human girl away separately. Is she really his beloved? Rudian says this is nonsense and suggests that the demons are simply hunting, since the whole situation started with Casley's disappearance. The sword says that if she awakens as a predator in the future, then the demon's interest in her is not surprising, and offers to awaken her and keep her close. He remarks that she has an appearance that appeals to human men, but Rudian tells him to be quiet, recalling the protagonist's suffering in the original story. Rebecca's awakening in the original was the choice of the protagonist Abel, and he would have preferred the girl to live a normal life. Rudian intends to keep in touch with her in the future, because if the plot follows the original and Rebecca becomes Abel's companion, they will be able to meet again. Adi informs his master that someone is approaching, and clarifies that they are not bandits, but they do not look hostile. It turns out to be an ordinary old man and a girl, and Rudian remarks that they are too unusual a couple for travelers. He doesn't know what to do because his stamina is running out, but if they are not enemies, then there is no point in avoiding them. Two people with huge swords appear in front of him, obviously travelers. Rudian doesn't understand how such people can be ordinary because their appearance says otherwise. He notices the expensive fabric on their clothes and realizes that they are most likely nobles, and if he had known this earlier, he would have already run away. The girl takes off her hood and is the first to greet Rudian. The guy doesn't smell blood from them and also says hello. The man notes that he looks like a small guard dog, but as a warrior, he has good instincts. At this point, the man receives a system notification that, with his current capabilities, he is unable to recognize information about the enemy. Rudian understands that he cannot find out anything about these people due to the great difference in power. The two are incredibly strong, and the man, seeing many corpses on the floor, asks if this is his doing. Rudian replies that he was not alone and did all this together with the villagers. The man looks at one of the corpses and notices that it looks like the guy's work, and Rudian confirms that he did it. The man remarks that Rudian looks like he's still a teenager and asks what family he's from, and the girl remarks that her uncle hasn't shown such interest in a long time. The man explains that the reason is that Rudian has skills that prove themselves even in such a backwater where there is no normal academy for awakening mana, and such abilities at his age naturally arouse interest. Rudian is shocked that the man was able to tell he had mana just by looking at him. He realizes that these two are much stronger than he thought, and he cannot understand who they are because they do not look like the local nobles at all. The man asks the guy what his name is, and, upon hearing the answer, asks for his last name. Rudian replies that he has no last name, which surprises the strangers. They are amazed because surely he's not a knight, even though he clearly has mana and skill. Rudian explains that he is merely Lord Kalayan's squire despite having awakened his mana and wielding a sword. He says that he was protecting his village and property, and also wanted to test the power he had just received. He asks the strangers who they are because in his years of service as a squire, he had never met anyone like them. The man replies that he is Marquise Keitel von Delphion and the girl is Luciella von Delphion. Rudian is shocked because Keitel is the holy sword of the Empire, recognized as the best swordmaster in Morian. He is the younger brother of Duke Delphion and a former commander of the Imperial Guard. Moreover, he was the predecessor of the Holy Sword Crox, who joined the protagonist in the original story. Apparently, he is still active and has not retired. Rudian also recognizes Luciella, the protagonist's loyal ally and the commander of the front line against the demons. In the original, she was already married, so she did not become a heroine, but she enjoyed the fanatical love of readers. Now she is still young and unmarried. Her face and confidence are completely consistent with the original description. The presence of the Delphion nobles is most likely related to the evaluation of the sacred sword, and the Marquis asks who taught him fencing. Rudian understands that he needs to remain calm and replies that he learned from a mercenary and trained on his own, participating in nightly exercises. Keitel wonders who this mercenary is and suspects that the guy is hiding his identity. If it were the king of mercenaries, he would recognize him, but the teacher has no remarkable features. Keitel says he would like to meet his mentor, but Rudian cannot say that he studied with an AI. He learned the art of swordsmanship from the Odora civilization, whose data is stored in Adi, and while he has not yet mastered it completely, in a sense he may be the only heir to this ancient art in the current era. Luciella asks her uncle not to pressure the guy because he is starting to feel awkward and apologizes to Rudian. The guy is surprised that the noble girl apologizes because most nobles are real idiots, but says that everything is fine. Luciella says that the village needs to be cleaned up after the massacre and asks her uncle to help her. Then Rudian realizes that she really is a candidate for a heroine. However, he cannot understand why he is being dragged to the main estate, where people are already shouting about a feast and entrusting Derek with guarding the marquis and the young lady. Rudian still considers himself on vacation and does not want to get involved in new difficult matters because an ordinary squire like him should not be involved in the appraisal of the sacred sword. Luciella says goodbye to him, says that they will see each other again, and thanks him for the work he has done. Now he lies in his bed and wonders if Rebecca is okay because she looked tense and like she had a cold. For some reason, Rebecca refused to go, and in the end he was dragged here alone. But even if he had stayed, he would still have been sent away for recovery, so he was taken almost by force. He could not have guessed that the scent of blood he smelled when he met the nobles came from knights planning an attack. These two single-handedly destroyed over 500 elite soldiers. Rudian needs to become stronger, restore all of Adi's terminals, and take risks to have a chance against the demons. To truly fight them, he needs to reach at least master level. In his current situation, it is better to join the training of the knightly order and strengthen his personal skills. He hears laughter and conversations outside, realizing that the feast is in full swing. Daylight is well preserved, which is good. If you forget about the future, this place could become hell, but until then, they will be able to live relatively peacefully. Adi informs the owner that he has a guest. Kellen enters his room with the knight and asks why he is not at the feast. Rudian doesn't know what to do because he is a commoner, and if he goes, he might be beaten. He says he does not have the status to participate in the noble celebration. Kalayan doesn't understand because he's his squire and should be helping at the feast. The guy would like the Lord to admit that he's still on vacation. But he says that he was recently ill, and the Lord replies that he already understood this. Derek turns to him and says that he heard about his contribution to recent events. Rudian is amazed that the rumors reached the Count so quickly, as it usually took days. This means that either Keitel or Luciella directly informed the Count about his actions. Derek says the Count is very pleased with his work. The Delphian Duke's family is doing well, but they have one additional request. Kalayan reports that he is being asked to go to the Imperial Academy for training for a period of 7 years. Rudian guessed that even though Kalayan had earned the credit for restoring daylight, from the Duke's family's perspective, if this troublemaker caused trouble again, it would damage their reputation. They may want the Lord to spend 7 years diligently at the Academy to bury his past dishonor, but the ducal family dreams of the impossible. Derek interrupts his thoughts and informs him that Rudian is also included in this trip. This really surprises the guy, and he can't believe that he's going there too. At this time, Marquis Keitel held the sacred sword Daylight in his hands and said that it was truly real, and the unique feeling of the holy sword that he experienced as a child remained to this day. The Count sat at the table, and everyone was delighted. Everything was as expected. Seimer Dron was a knight who had only reached the expert level 50 years ago, and if he had become a death knight, he would have already reached the master level. Although they provided information, he didn't expect Iskar to succeed, and he would have to change his mind about the Lionhearts. He said that Derek's reputation as the Iron Lion of the East did not seem to be exaggerated, and asked how about having a duel with the Marquis. The man bowed and said that it would be a great honor for him. The Marquis provided documents confirming the condition of the sacred sword and decided that this would conclude the main matter. He wanted to ask the Count a trivial favor. The man was shocked. If he was talking about this here, where all the vassals were gathered, then this was not a trifling request, but a serious one. Keitel said that among the young lord's squires he had heard of a child named Rudian, and he asked if the Count could give this man to the Marquis. Rickard asked if he could find out the reason why the man wanted this child, and he replied that he was simply interested in this boy's talent. He found out about him, and all he heard was that he was a commoner who had not even received a knight's oath and wanted to send him to a fund that was managed directly by the ducal family. The Count understood that it was difficult to get into this fund even with significant talent, and this child had a talent worthy of the Marquis' interest, although, according to rumors, he did not even have an aptitude for mana. Rickard replied that his son might be a little disappointed, but if the Marquis wished it, then that was quite natural. Suddenly, he noticed how happy his niece Luciella was at this news. He said that, however, this child was one of those whom he had marked as a talent to help his son, who would become the future lord. He suggested that Rudian should be sent to the academy first, and until he graduated, both families would take care of him, and then, when he became a real knight, it would be good to let him choose who he belonged to. The Count didn't understand why the Marquis was so eager to get his hands on this child, but if he really valued him, he could take him later. Keitel said that sounded good, and Rickard added that he should take the opportunity to enroll his son in the academy, since it had come to that, and also resolve the issue of Kalane's admission. Derek announced to the boy that he was officially becoming a student at the academy and would be enrolled along with the young master. Rudian knew this was good news, but he was worried why no one had asked his opinion. After a while, he was already going out into the street with his briefcase packed, and Marcus Keitel noted that they had met again. The guy remembered how the man said that they would see each other again, and he realized that everything had been planned from the very beginning. Keitel gave him a week to settle all the affairs, and then he would go with them to the capital, and the girl said that accepting her uncle's offer was a good choice. Rudian said he was glad he would be able to end his squire duties without leaving his family, though he was sad he wouldn't be able to see Kalane's next victim. After that, he said that they would see each other in a week and left. He went into a tavern near the village of Baran, where he was immediately greeted and offered a drink. The headman said that who would have thought that a future knight would come from their village. Rudian replied that he was just a beginner and not yet a knight, and Marco said that he was going to enter the capital's academy. Everything was practically already decided. Knighthood was almost guaranteed for him, because the former military man knew well. The main question was under which noble banner he would serve. Rudian suddenly asked about Rebecca, and the headman said that she was still resting. The injury received as a result of the incident turned out to be quite serious. After some time, the guy came into Rebecca's room and asked if she was okay. The girl replied that she was much better than before and said that she had heard about his intention to go to the capital. She asked him if he really had to leave, the first time she had asked him so directly. She asked him to stay because, in her opinion, it would be great to live together in happiness and peace. Rebecca knew it was selfish of her, but she just decided to ask just in case. Rudian began to feel sad. In fact, the original plot is just an original story, and he avoided the girl only because she seemed to him an intrusive heroine. It was an excuse. In the coming era of chaos, the importance of the meanings associated with Rebecca began with his own incompetence and inability to even reach her fingers and toes, so he ignored her feelings. But now everything had changed, and he took her hand. He said he wished he could do it too if it was possible. The villagers might think he had succeeded, but he didn't really want it that badly. But there is something he simply must do. If he leaves things as they are, the village of Baran will disappear in at least 10 years. Rebecca, who lost her place due to the invasion of the kingdom of Rohance, will eventually meet the protagonist Abel and set off on an adventure. Even if the boy stays where he is, Abel will still drive the demons out of the village, and the people he knows will surely disappear. This will not be good for either him or Rebecca, and only he who knows the future of this world can prevent this. It will certainly be hard and difficult work, but it is something that only Rudian can do, and to do it, he must go this way. But he doesn't expect Rebecca to understand the meaning of these words. The girl asked if she would be of any use to him if she awakened her blood. She said that he knows everything about her. Rudian didn't understand how Rebecca knew this, since in the original work she wasn't supposed to know until she met the main character, and he said that that power would make her unhappy. The demon eater power that Rebecca had is simply energy that absorbs demonic power that is deadly to humans. The stronger she becomes, the more her mind suffers. Rebecca, even if the fate of the main character Abel turns out differently, he wants her to live here happily. He just hopes that the girl will continue to exist as a bright, energetic person. If only he could replace Abel, but unfortunately that was not possible, and Rebecca said she would stay in the village. It was a good idea, and instead she asked the guy to make her one promise. She asked that when everything was over, he should not go to other places and return to her. After some time, Rudian was sitting in another place with a sword in his hands, and he asked if it was him. Sword didn't understand what he meant. The guy explained that Rebecca's condition was caused by him. It is possible that the sword only reacts after encountering demonic energy, at least from high-ranking demons or higher. Using demonic energy against others without his consent was a breach of contract, and the sword said that he didn't expect a person of this era to even know that. But he did the right thing by following Rudian. He added that if awakening that human woman was really his doing, then it would be okay if he took damage too. But now he is completely fine and admits that it is because of the enormous power he possesses, although this is only an indirect cause. Suddenly, Rudian felt pain and grabbed his chest, and the sword said that it seemed like the guy understood everything. Now he realizes that all of this is because of him, and the proof of the contract with the demon is the amount of demonic energy in the heart. No matter how tiny it was enough to influence the blood of the sleeping demon eater. Next time, he would be grateful if the sword warned him beforehand if possible, and the weapon replied that it would take this into account, although he doubted the outcome would have changed, even if he had warned it. A week later, Rudian and Kalena were walking along a sunny street with other people, now in the capital of the Mauryan Empire, Nevin. There are ordinary people walking along the street, as well as elves, goblins, and beastmen. Rudian thinks, it seems to him, that he has entered a fantasy world, and this world is about 1.5 times larger than the main castle of Iskar. Callan asks the boy if he found anything tasty, and also does not understand why his father and even Derek care so much about Rudian. The guy thinks that the Lord probably can't even imagine that he awakened mana. Kalayan says that as soon as he graduated from the academy, his father immediately ordered him to be accepted into their family, and this seems strange. Rudian was curious about why this strange joint sponsorship happened, and it turns out that this was the reason, and the Count probably told Kalayan not to talk about it in front of the guy. The Lord says he believes in the friendship that has developed between them, And even though his father told him to keep it a secret, they are not the kind of people to hide secrets from each other. Rudian doesn't know what to make of friendship, but the resentment he felt for cleaning up after the Lord had definitely built up. Kalin suggests that he meet again when they enter the academy since he will most likely be looked down upon. Because he is a commoner, it means he will be next to the Lord and no one will dare to show disrespect to him. But it seems the guy still hasn't realized that it's not Rudian who will be respected, but Kalin, who might even be expelled at first for causing trouble, but that's no longer his problem. Together they reached the main residence of Duke Delphian, and a man came out to them who told Keitel that he had asked him to return the sacred sword, but he had gotten involved in something strange again. The Marquis replied that it was his hobby in his old age and asked if the man in front of him was being too harsh since he was his brother. The head of House Delphian, Duke Vincent Delphian, says he didn't think Iskar would be able to retrieve the sword. Rudian understands that this is Keitel's older brother and the highest figure in the Empire. The head of the house takes the sword in his hands and says that this really happened, as the prophecy of the previous generation said. He then invites Rudian to come into the house, as he hasn't seen his brother lusting after someone like that in a long time and would like to chat with the guy. This surprises Rudian, and he doesn't understand what the hell is going on. Now they are sitting in the main hall at the table drinking tea, and Vincent says that first of all he wants to thank him for his efforts and the long journey. Rudian understands that this is clearly not a simple meeting, because if they brought him into the house it means they have some kind of goal. Vincent asks his brother if he is upset about how much he gave to those people from Iskar, because in life you always have to sacrifice something. Keitel explains why someone who had no interest in the Foundation's affairs and had never cared for the children brought here before is behaving differently today, because he is very curious about it. He asks why they brought this boy here on purpose. The head of the house says that as far as he understands, Rudian is one of those who directly participated in the conquest of the dungeon together with the heir of Iskar. He heard that the guy was the main participant who destroyed the dungeon's core and killed Simir Dion, who was prolonging his life by connecting with the dungeon. Rudian replies that everything is correct and does not understand how the Duke of the Capital knows such detailed information about what happened in the dungeon. Vincent asks if Simir said anything when he confronted the guy. Any information will do for him, and the guy must tell everything he heard from Simir. Keitel couldn't understand what his brother was talking about, but Rudian realized that Simir wasn't just a thief, and in any case there was no need to hide it. He began to quote his words, not even suspecting that the ground beneath their feet was rotting. If he had to add one more thing before he was destroyed, he uttered, "My lord," as his last words. The leader was very surprised by this and said that another name for the day sword is the Sword of Prophecy. The previous generation tried to make amends for past actions, but in the end, the inevitable happened. Keitel asked what that meant, and the man replied that it meant nothing and thanked the boy for answering his unusual request. Rudian looked at him in surprise but remained silent. After some time, they found themselves at the Imperial Manhwa Academy and were greeted by the director, who told Keitel that it was rare for him to personally bring a supported student. This is their first meeting since the Crown Prince's last birthday celebration at a court banquet. The director of the academy is Marquis Rosus Bevalent, a war hero who earned military merit in battles with northern enemies 30 years ago and guardian of the Northern Front. Rudian is happy when he sees him because he is a very popular hero. Keitel points to the boy and says that this is the one he discovered in Iskar's territory, and it looks like he has gained unexpected benefits other than the Holy Sword. The director asks if the man really means to say that he is more than just a talented genius. Keitel replies that this guy could be on Crox's level. Rudian is a little worried because he can't be compared to a talent like Crox, who is the only martial artist capable of confronting gods with a sword. With the exception of the main character, compared to Crox, this is not a talent, but a disaster. Keitel says there is no need to elaborate, as they can discuss it in a few years, but since he is a commoner, he would appreciate it if the director would keep a little eye on him. The man asked if there were such inferior people at the academy, but promised to be attentive. Rudian walked down the hallway, found the Imperial Academy dormitory, and was shocked to see that he had his own room. This room looks as good as Kalane's room. Keitel says that he will live here for the next 7 years and asks if he likes it, and the guy replies that he does, but wants to ask why the man is doing all this for him. He checked the contents of the contract from the Delphian Foundation, and other than joint sponsorship with Count Iskar, he found no coercion or obligations. Keitel says that a reason is not really necessary, as the desire to continue on the path to the future for a promising talent is already sufficient motivation. Rudian replies that this is sufficient, but it is too much money to be considered charity, and despite this level of investment, the contract does not even provide minimal protection. The man replied that he had heard that the boy had also worked as a secretary to the young lord, and that indeed his mind worked well, since he had entered into an agreement with the Count after graduating from the academy. Whether he joins the Knights of the Lionheart or the Knights of Glory, these are their conditions. But the guy should know that things just worked out that way for them, which is why the contract doesn't include any details about the circumstances. Rudian understands that in the future he will have to choose one side or the other, but the academy is only an interim means to an end. Cadel leaves and says that he will look forward to seeing what choice the guy makes. Rudian himself thinks that his choice is to escape with profit, but there is something else. When the guy is left alone in the room, he turns to his sword. He asks if he felt anything related to demonic energy, especially in Delphian, and he replies that it's an unexpected question, but he didn't feel any demonic energy. The guy asks if he is sure because even though he is sealed in the sword and most of his senses are blocked, he is a demon and should feel something like this. Adi flies up to the guy and asks if something is bothering him. In the original work, Vincent, the Duke, was an unfortunate figure who, along with Keitel, was killed by demons. After the murder of Vincent and his brother, Luciella became the head of House Delphian, and the circumstances of the Duke's family's life remained only a MacGuffin. Rudian doesn't understand what the reason could be, because if we think in terms of cause and effect, then Keitel had no motive to kill the Duke, and this is definitely strange. Of course, there was indeed an attempt on the man's life when he was leaving the capital, as happened this time, but the Duke was killed openly in the capital. Being killed simply for being an enemy of the demons seems unnatural, since, on the other hand, most of the high-ranking nobles in the capital would then become targets. There's clearly something wrong here, something important that can't be ignored, and it looks like Rudian should make friends with the Duke's family. Rudian was already sitting in the classroom, and the rest of his classmates were looking at him intently. Adi noted that, as expected, there were many who recognized his master's true worth, and although he understood that student transfer was difficult, the amount of attention was simply overwhelming. The demon in the sword said that there were so many delicious-looking souls. In human terms, it was called a buffet. Rudian wonders if all this attention is due to the support of the Keitel Foundation, but he has heard that there are about 30 sponsored students in the Knights department. Including himself, there were only 7 such first-year students, and suddenly a guy came up to him, said hello, and asked to sit next to him. Rudian also said hello, said that it was possible, and introduced himself. The stranger's name was Adele. He was glad to meet the transfer student everyone was talking about. They were in the same year, but he was older. Rudian says he's also glad to meet him, and asks why everyone is talking about him. To which Adele is surprised, since it's been almost 10 years since the Foundation accepted an exchange student. The guy realizes that 10 years is a long time, but is it really worth all that attention since he is not a prince or a princess, but just a random commoner? Adele replies that he really doesn't know because student exchanges are generally prohibited at Manhwa Academy. The only ones who can bypass this ban are either particularly famous individuals or high-ranking nobles close to the imperial family, and he was accepted because he was personally brought by the Holy Sword Keitel. And also because since Crocs there hasn't been a single exchange student from their foundation. But not only he, but also the young lord of House Iskar, who obtained the sacred sword, also attracts attention for similar reasons. Rudian understands that the lord studies in the same faculty, but in a different class, and he does not want to run into him. Adele says the reason he came was a special request from the student council president. Lady Luciella asked him because he had seen Keitel and should at least have heard her name. Rudian realized that this girl was the student council president and was surprised. Adele explains that when commoners first enter the academy, it is natural to feel overwhelmed and unsure of what to do, so there is a tradition of guiding new students, and he was appointed as Rudian's guide. But since he is also in the Knights faculty, it will be a little disappointing if their first meeting turns out to be just a formality. For novice knights, conversation preceded by physical entry into combat is a tradition. But everyone here is very nice, so he shouldn't worry. And here he is, his new friend and some other unfamiliar guys standing in the training arena of the Imperial Academy. One guy introduces himself as Oliver Dran, a 5th-year student, and says it's always nice to meet new students. A girl, Claudia Reyes, also a 5th year, admits she expected to see a monster, but instead saw just a cute child. Adele introduces another girl, Karen Letitia. The girl interrupts him and says that she is a final-year student, is glad to meet him, and heard that the Holy Sword personally brought the guy. Rudian says that this is true, but it is all because Keitel saw something special in him, and since he would not praise him without a good reason, the girl decides that it is better to look at his skills right away. She places a wooden sword in front of him and says that she wants to duel him. Karen throws the second sword at his feet and tells him not to worry, as she won't be fighting at full strength, she just wants to evaluate his abilities. He should be fighting at full power, but Rudian, looking at her face, understands that it says otherwise. Adele turns to Karen and asks if she didn't promise not to step out of line, and the girl replies that when she said absorbing, she meant that she would simply try. Oliver says he's curious, and Claudia adds that she heard the Lord chose only one person, and that was Sir Croaks. Rudian drops to the floor for his sword and doesn't understand whether he really has no choice. Maybe it's easier to kill them all and seize power. Karen notices that he has an unusual stance and asks if she can find out the name of his style. Rudian gets into a fighting stance and says that this is Adora's style, a martial art based on the sword. Karen says it's interesting, but she's never heard of him, and orders him to attack. The guy prepares for battle and rushes towards her. Their wooden swords intersect with a loud sound. Rudian attacks the girl and only touches her hair, and she hits him on the shoulder in response. They both run around the arena and fight skillfully, sometimes hitting each other. Oliver says his skills are a bit disappointing, while Claudia thinks he has no control over his lower body and his movements are too light. Moreover, its shape seems disordered. Adi is outraged at how they dare insult the style of the sacred sword that can kill Bokov because they can't even imagine how many creators suffered over this. Adele shouts at her friend not to hold back even though the guy is already giving it his all. The opponents stand silently, looking at each other and trying to catch their breath. And Karen realizes that she would not have believed it if she had not seen it herself. From the outside, it looks like a wild swing without a stand, but each movement is free and organically connected to the other. He creates a chain of counter moves that block any form of counterattack because this style is created solely for killing. It's impressive, but the lack of craftsmanship is too noticeable. She doesn't think this is enough to attract the Lord's attention, but she realizes there is something else she doesn't know about. This depresses her and she decides to end it. Karen fixes the mana in her hands, runs towards him and swings. A small explosion occurs and everyone watching the fight is surprised. Karen can't understand how he was able to block her mana-enhanced attack if he himself is unable to control it. With the last of his strength, Rudian holds his ground and asks if she considers this cheating. The boy realizes that Karen channeled mana into her wooden sword, wanting to humiliate him in front of everyone. The girl is surprised that the newly accepted student uses mana and is also a commoner. Then everything becomes clear to her and she realizes how he became a student, not expecting him to block her last blow. She bows and apologizes for not being able to use mana as the eldest. Rudian replies that he hopes not to encounter anything like this again since Luciella may have recommended him, but her opinion of people may be wrong. Karen says that as an apology, she will fulfill one of his requests and hopes that this will help smooth things over, since it was not worth using mana on a first-year student. Everyone present was shocked by Karen's apology and by how the guy was able to block a blow charged with mana. Suddenly, a man appears at the door and asks what all the fuss is about. This man came on Luciella's orders to check on the new student, and he saw how Karen had the audacity to test his skills and received a worthy rebuff. Alvin says it doesn't seem like she meant any harm and apologizes to Rudian. The guy immediately recognizes this man, Alvin Kepler, who appeared in the original work in the chapter about the War of Superhumans. In that story, he was the main antagonist, and the guy is almost sure that in the original story, Alvin was a character who helped the final boss. Alvin explains that their girlfriend is very determined and suggests seeing her again in the next few days. Karen stops him and says she doesn't need his help. The man interrupts, saying that during the welcoming ceremony for new students, factions and positions do not matter. Moreover, he came here at the personal request of Lady Luciella, and, in his opinion, her status should not be neglected. As a senior, he will also take responsibility for today's incident. Rudian thinks that he didn't plan on getting involved with these guys anymore, but if he's the one who wants to make contact, if he is that same Kepler, then that is a different matter. After a while, he was already sitting in his room, and Adi told the guy that he had become completely relaxed lately. Rudian can't do anything about it because the room is so nice. Who would have thought that he would be so happy just being away from Kalain? The monster says that today the guy planned to find out about Alvin Kepler and his entourage. Battle of the Superhumans is the only chapter where the war was not fought over good and evil, but over differences in views, and although Alvin acted as an antagonist, he was not the enemy. 3 days have passed and there has been no sign of Alvin, and if we recall the original plot and analyze the past, then if the guesses are correct, it is approximately clear where he might be. He decides that he and his assistants must make the first move. He approaches Diablo and says that if they run into any demons, he might need his help and asks if he minds. Diablo doesn't know what happened in the last 10,000 years, but if they were planning a new invasion of the human world without him, then there's no hope of success. People dare to encroach on the glory that rightfully belongs to him? Yes, let them all die. Adi notes that the guy seems very interested in superhumans, and he replies that he would like to recruit them to his side if possible, but is still curious about what is special about them. The Alvin Kepler he remembers is definitely not a knight. He is a Superman. Most likely, the secret organization of superhumans was already actively expanding its influence beyond the capital, and their abilities were considered insufficiently studied, which is why magicians treated them with disdain. But this bias became a huge tragedy for all of humanity, because it was this bias that forced the superhumans to do nothing during the second battle with the heavenly demon, which resulted in many casualties. Of course, they planned to strengthen their reputation by dealing with the demons, when the influence of the magicians was completely shaken, but by that time the war had already been ended thanks to the main character, Abel, and his comrades, and then the superhumans moved to the background. Thus began the Battle of the Superhumans, and if they had participated in the Second Great Demon War, perhaps this battle could have been avoided. Rudian intends to recruit these superhumans to participate in the war against the demons. The demon that laughs draws others in and uses them as a shield. He even enjoys it. But in the current situation, it will not be easy for the guy to lure anyone away. Status remains a problem today, but if he has a trump card that will interest the enemy, then any deal is doomed to success, and he already has a sea of information that can become such a trump card. He puts on his cloak and now sets out on a journey through the capital of the empire. The Mauryan Empire, the capital of Navan, the bustling western district. Alvin Kepler arrived there late in the evening. He asked his interlocutor if he was sure that this place was located here, since guards often patrol here. It's hard to believe that streets like these are controlled by demons, but the girl says she has reliable informants. Taking off her hood, she says that the demons are connected to the temple, so they are trustworthy, and introduces herself. She is in the color course, Maria Kepler. Her brother says that even if the information is accurate, there are plenty of nobles here, and if something goes wrong, a massacre will begin and the consequences will be irreversible. And the girl replies that their family has foreseen this and prepared special insurance. She brought an artifact of the Oparts level. The man says they need to act covertly, even if the situation is serious, and Maria says that's exactly why she brought him, because it's unknown what they'll face. Alvin turns to the other children and says that their role is extremely important. They must find traces of the demons. The second-year knights, Del Ruda and Nell Ruda, respond that they can be trusted. Maria recalls the Ruda family's ability to detect alien energy even among a huge crowd, and she regrets that such talents are now working for her brother. Alvin tells her not to say that because it's all for their purpose, and besides, soon she will lead everyone herself. At this time, Rudian was walking along the same streets, and although even the dark corners of the capital are quite developed, this is not the most pleasant place. Adi asks what his master is planning to do here, but so far nothing, because now the secret organization is increasing its influence in the underground. There is likely a fierce battle for territory with demons emerging and preparing for the Second Great War. He turns to his sword and asks if it can sense the demon energy surges in the city, even if they are not coming from here, and it replies that such a pitiful city cannot escape it. This is good because what the guy is currently aiming for is the only way to naturally intervene in the conflict between superhumans and demons. Facing the Demon Kings face-to-face is practically suicide, and while it's unlikely they personally lead armies in such places, they likely operate through subordinates, so the risk is minimal. All this matches the story of Alec Huma from the village of Baran, so it would be ideal to contact him. Ghoul von Belstad, the demon puppet and killer of the Keidel brothers, is the #1 person to eliminate in the current situation. Rudian decides that he needs to find Alvin Kepler first and then deal with Ghoul, but suddenly someone grabs him by the shoulder and speaks to him. The man asks what such a young guy is doing here, and if he is an outsider, then he needs to get out of here nicely. Rudian is glad that the guide showed up just in time and asks why he cares what this man is doing here. The stranger is angry and wants to tell him something, but the guy grabs him by the shoulder. After this, a magical wave passes from his hand, which is reflected throughout the man's entire body. He falls to the floor and grabs his shoulder. He is trembling all over and asks the guy if he is really a knight. Rudian says that if the stranger answers his questions honestly from now on, he will let him go. Lately, suspicious nobles have been increasingly wandering around the dark areas of the capital, and it is especially alarming if green-haired people or students from the Manhwa Academy are among them. He asks the stranger to tell everything he saw, heard, or learned, and to hide nothing. Alvin and Maria were walking down the street, and the girl said that she heard that a senior named Karen had gotten her hands on one of the notorious newcomers. She enjoys the special favor of Lady Luciella, and this is not the best scenario for them, but Alvin replies that in any case, the lady is not their enemy, and she must either be lured away or remain neutral. Maria asks her brother if he thinks this newcomer could ruin everything, and he replies that he doesn't know. If Karen has already tested his abilities and failed, then he has serious potential, but he needs to try harder to turn all their plans upside down. He says that this guy is still green and will not change anything for them, and he will be the one to become the Swordmaster's apprentice. They really should be wary of Karen because they have been competing with her for 7 years now. After a short pause, he tells her to move on and the girl agrees without objection. Rudian stands on the roof of a tall building and finally realizes that he has found those he has been looking for so long. Finally, they come face to face and Rudian asks Adi if he feels anything. He answers that yes, and asks if these people are mutants, since it is unexpected to meet such unusual creatures in this era. The most powerful superhuman in human history and the main boss of the Battle of Superhumans is a being who breaks all boundaries, Maria Kepler. Rudian asks Diablo if he's sure his disguise is secure, and he replies that he'd like to say that with his power, there's nothing to worry about. But this time, it's better to be safe than sorry. The boy agrees, because the fact that the Kepler siblings are acting on their own speaks to the extreme importance of the situation. And now they are about to move on to the main part of their journey. Alvin pointed to the building and said that this was the L. Granhart Theater they were looking for. He couldn't believe that the mages were actually involved in what was happening, so arrogant that they didn't notice how the flames were already approaching their heels. He asked his sister what their chances were, and she replied that the Viscount could either be a demon or his servant, but if the family archives were to be believed, there shouldn't be any major problems. However, if there are more enemies or they show their full strength, things will become much more complicated, and although it is unlikely that the Demon King himself will appear, one can only hope that the Viscount is just his servant. Maria and Alvin, along with Dell and Nell, entered the building along with a group of strangers. On the top floor of the theater, they noticed a dark haze, which confirmed their suspicions. There was a demonic energy and the smell of blood in this place, and it was unclear how such a thing had gone unnoticed. Alvin said that, according to rumors, the Viscount was not just a merchant, but a powerful magician who was once destined for a place in the Magic Tower, and most likely he covered his tracks with the help of magic. It turned out that this place is a real magician's laboratory. They entered the room where a man stood and asked what brought such respected students of the Imperial Academy to this place. Alvin told him to stop pretending, asking if he really thought they wouldn't figure out who was behind all these creatures that were constantly bothering them. Viscount Good Belstad merely smiled slyly, blowing out cigarette smoke. He stated that the Sayoris Trade Alliance had long since realized who was behind all this, since the bandits who had been carrying out random raids on his business had suddenly disappeared. Alvin retorted that it was the Viscount who hired the real bandits, and it was not for him to throw around accusations. The Viscount learned that before him were the Kepler and Rudd families, trading dynasties without significant holdings who dared to encroach on his alliance, and now their families must prepare for retribution. Alvin was outraged that he dared to mention their families, being a servant of demons himself. Belstad was surprised that they came already knowing everything they needed to know about him. Alvin took out a sword hidden by magic and declared that he would kill the man and destroy all the demons hiding in the Empire. The man also activated the demonic power and realized that their goal was to thwart the demons' plans. Alvin realized that their determination exceeded his expectations, and he realized that the man did not know what they were counting on, although it was only the 4 of them, which was even for the better. Alvin was surprised by the words about 5 and turned around. I saw Rudian, who wished everyone a good day, deciding that this was an opportune moment to intervene. The tension increased as the 2 ignored him for 3 days. In the main story, the Viscount was a character who loyally served the Northern Demons before the Second Heavenly Demon War. At the decisive moment, he performed a heroic deed, killing Cattell, Duke Vincent, and wrote his name into history. Rudian didn't expect to have to fight the Viscount so soon because, according to the plot, they were supposed to meet much later. The Viscount was 53 years old, the head of a trading alliance, and had temporary immortality thanks to a contract with a spirit. The guy found it strange that for a high servant, his characteristics were inferior even to those of Alec, with whom they fought in the village of Barony. Alvin interrupted Rudian's thoughts and asked if he had really been following them and who he was anyway. The guy replied that he was an ally and one of his goals coincided with theirs. Pointing to the Viscount, he said that he needed to destroy the demon minions. Alvin was amazed that the boy knew about the Viscount's connections with demons because this information was strictly classified. Rudian explained that he was a member of a secret organization called Adora, which strives to maintain peace throughout the world. Alvin admitted that he had never heard of such an organization. Rudian added that their scale is incomparable to the Psychic Empire, of which Maria and Alvin are a part. Their surprise increased because the guy even knew about the existence of their organization. Rudian said that before announcing the deal, he wanted to offer something. He will help to deal with the man, and in exchange, they will form an alliance with him. He was curious to see how they would react, so Maria turned to her brother. She had absolutely no idea who this man was or how he had managed to follow them unnoticed all this time. She was surprised why he was addressing his proposal to her, and not to her brother, as would have been logical. She couldn't understand how he even knew that she was the one secretly heading their underground organization. Rudian calmly asked her what her answer was, and Maria, without hesitation, directly stated that she refused. She could not accept such a serious offer from a man who aroused her strong suspicion, especially after it turned out that he had been following them all this time, and now they were not going to just let him go. After dealing with the Viscount, they will also deal with the guy himself, so he should be prepared. This scene is one of the events in the original plot where the Viscount was supposed to live much longer. And if the fight starts, innocent people will suffer. The Viscount turned to them and asked if this farce was over, and Rudian was wondering what method they would use to drive the man into a corner. Good stated that they were allowed to fight as much as they wanted, but he wanted to see how the pups would handle going into Tither's lair. He shouted for the celebration to begin and released dark power towards the people. Maria immediately took out a magical artifact, an hourglass, and began to spin it in her hand. She held the artifact in front of her and it absorbed the dark magic. The Viscount was surprised that the artifact affected space. It was a relic of the Opart's level that even the masters of the 4 great towers would envy. He decided that he would definitely take the artifact for himself and called them naive fools if they thought that changing the location would help them. The rude siblings realized they were sensing demonic energy, and Alvin realized he no longer had to hold back. The Viscount opened many black portals of different shapes. Distorted animals emerged from them, scary dogs, snakes, and horned creatures. Everyone immediately realized that these were demonic creatures, and that the Viscount was also a summoner. The man changed shape, taking on a demonic appearance, rejoicing in the power bestowed upon him. He laughed, asking if they really thought they could harm him. His appearance changed, but that was not all. His power continued to grow as the highest servants were able to temporarily take the form of demons. Rudian wondered why the Viscount's characteristics were no different from those of Alec, a servant of mid-rank, and completely forgot about this peculiarity. The demon shouted that he would make them pay for stepping into a hornet's nest when they should have limited themselves to minor skirmishes in the alley. Alvin asked if the Viscount was really just a minion and not a noble of the underworld, and Maria told him not to relax because he was now stronger than most such demons. Snakes, huge dogs, and three-headed creatures ran from the demon's side, and the demon himself laughed, urging them to accept their death. Suddenly, Maria began to cast a spell and yellow portals appeared next to the creatures, cutting them apart. The Viscount did not understand how this was possible, since he did not feel any magical power from Maria. Her mana level seemed no different to him than that of an ordinary person. Maria asked the man if he really still didn't understand anything. Rudian recalled that Maria Kepler is a superhuman, and the final boss of one of the chapters, the head of a family in a world where many powerful individuals exist. His current level did not allow him to obtain any information about her. Her followers called her the Golden Empress. The demon was very surprised because this was not the kind of power that an ordinary mortal could possess. Maria's hair turned golden, and rising into the air, she said that no matter what tricks the man used, it would all be useless. Although he doesn't believe his eyes, the outcome is already predetermined. The Viscount screamed and called his servants. He ordered them to immediately destroy Mary and tear his enemies apart. All the demonic creatures rushed towards her, but soon stopped in fear. Dima couldn't understand whether he was hallucinating, because all the monsters began to be sucked into Maria's portal. He immediately tried to stop her and offered to make a deal. He is ready to give up all rights to the shadow business. He will swear allegiance to her master and facilitate the conclusion of a non-aggression pact because isn't that what they were trying to achieve? If necessary, he would even give up his share in the trade alliance, but Maria only laughed. The demon tried to stop her, but the monster he was standing on began to be pulled towards her portal along with him. The stones floating in the air began to fall on the animals, smashing their heads. Rudian respectfully called Maria the queen among all those with superpowers. In order to realize his future plans, he may be forced to make her his ally. Just a couple of seconds later, all that remained in the place of the enemy was a huge smoking hole from which thick steam was rising. Alvin was genuinely happy that his sister had managed to defeat the enemy, but Rudian immediately stopped him. He noted that such joyful words were now completely inappropriate and premature. You should carefully examine the place where he was, because there is a chance that the enemy is still alive. Alvin dismissed these thoughts, saying that, of course he was dead, because even a demon wouldn't survive after that. But suddenly a black, slimy stream began to flow out of the hole like a fountain. Maria was still levitating in the air and silently watched this. The demon began to gather from the drops of liquid and restore the body. He laughed, admitting that Maria was stronger, but even her strength was not enough to kill him. Maria agreed that under the current circumstances, she could not finish him off, if only she had prepared more thoroughly. The Viscount was glad that she admitted her defeat. Maria replied that the inability to destroy this body does not mean that there are no other ways. She snapped her finger and the demon began to become paralyzed. The girl said that if it was not human flesh, then there was no need to treat it like a human being. She will beat this shell until the awareness turns to dust, and then she will drag off his family and finish them off there. Rudian watched all this and understood that it would be better to die immediately if he could not convince her. Perhaps the same end awaits him. The demon contorted in pain and said with a laugh that, if his assumptions were correct, the artifact would soon exhaust its effect. The ability to freely control space is the power of the gods, which means the tool has limits, and there are no more than 10 minutes left. Maria looked at the hourglass and saw that almost all the sand had already drained. It seems the demon was not mistaken, and since he is stuck here, his master will soon intervene. The girl didn't know what to do because if the contractor showed up, even her strength might not be enough. Not that there was no way out, but the price would be heavy. Rudian realized that it was time for him to act. He stated that dialogue between them was possible again. Maria looked down at him from heaven and realized that he had warned her that the demon could not be killed. She repeated that she was refusing the alliance offer, but that did not mean there were no ways to defeat him. Rudian proposed a different option. They would reject the offer, but in return they would ask to hear the terms of the alliance. He added a promise that they would not harm him, as he was a little afraid of them. Alvin probably has a solution, but it certainly won't be elegant, Maria agreed, saying that she allowed for such a possibility, and Rudian was pleased with his quick reaction and realized that it was too late to retreat now. The girl turned to the demon and told him to be prepared for failure. Rudian grabbed the sword and turned to Diablo, who replied that he already knew where he was headed. He asked if Rudian really thought he couldn't handle the pitiful remnants of some demon king's forces. Rudian said he just wanted to clarify and began to approach the demon. He grabbed him by the mouth and then pierced him through with the sword, and Dima didn't understand what he was planning. He should have understood that the pain had no effect on him and that all this was pointless, and he should have stopped. But suddenly his body was pierced by hellish pain and he screamed. Rudian explained that, as a magician, he knows ways to suppress pain and immortality gives him excellent regeneration. He continued to punch and asked where the confidence had gone. After all, the demon's regeneration suddenly stopped working. Immortality was granted by contract, and although a subordinate could not be destroyed, today this rule could be suppressed by a high-ranking demon. Moreover, of all the demons, Diablo is the greatest king, having reached the pinnacle called the Seven Supreme Thrones. When immortality is blocked, regeneration also stops working. The demon screamed in pain and said that he could not be killed. Rudian answered with a joyful smile that it was possible. He pierced the demon's body with his sword again, and black energy appeared around it. The demon screamed, and a wave of dark magic erupted. Good Belstad, having lost the struggle for the inheritance of the Earl's family, began to study magic and reached such a level that he became a candidate for the role of successor to the head of the Tower of Mages. However, at a certain stage of development, he stopped and was excluded from the list of contenders. Exhausted, desperate, and out of patience, the man finally succumbed to temptation when a demon appeared to him. Thus he fell and became the puppet of the Overlord, destroyed his own family, and took the position of head of the trade union. Good became one of the main sources of funding for the demonic forces within the Empire, and a link between them and the aristocracy. Even if the path of magic was closed to him, making a deal with a demon remains unforgivable, and now that the man is dead, the demons in the Empire have lost much of their support. His magical power has been added to his chart, but the readings are barely up to the level at which they eliminated Castley. Maria descended from heaven and asked the couple how he managed to kill the demon. Suddenly, she noticed a demonic sword in his hands. Rudian said that she could see that his weapon had done all this and asked what the problem was. He wondered if he looked like a madman intoxicated with demonic energy. According to him, it is irrational to destroy the bearer of a demonic sword just for its possession, because who has ever seen anyone kill demons with this blade? The sword said that in the old days there were countless such people, but the guy asked him not to spoil the atmosphere. Rudian understands that Maria and Alvin are worried, but they must not ignore the current situation. Sword said that modern views on common sense are no longer what they were in his time. It doesn't matter where the man got the demonic sword now, Maria thought, but what matters is how he maintains his sanity while using it. She apologized for overreacting because the main thing was that he kept his promise, and now she is ready to discuss his proposal. Sometime later, they were sitting in the Imperial Academy dormitory in Maria's room. Maria decides to introduce herself formally. She is Maria Lou Kepler, the future head of the Psychic Empire. The guy also introduces himself. He is Rudian, an official member of the secret organization Adora, created to maintain world order. Maria ponders. World order sounds too pompous to be true, although yesterday's events really impressed her. However, she still has doubts about him because in their archival records there is no mention of an organization called Adora. Rudian explained that there were few of them, so no one had heard of them, and that he himself was actually a one-man band. Maria decides to get straight to the point and asks what specific benefit they will receive from this union. Rudian believes that there are many advantages, but it is enough to mention one to convince even Maria. He says that there are many secret societies on the continent, but they turn specifically to the Psionic Order. Because they meet the conditions, Adora has 3 criteria for entering into an alliance. First, they are not bearers of evil. Second, the organization must have sufficient numbers and influence. And thirdly, and lastly, they pursue goals that are most beneficial for all parties. Maria replies that the first 2 points are clear to her, but the third raises questions. The guy talks about mutual benefit, even if their ultimate goal is still unknown. Rudian asks if psionics, like magic, isn't a generally accepted superpower. Their containment of demonic forces in the shadow of the Empire, as well as blocking the intervention of mages, is aimed solely at recognizing their merits. If they contribute to the destruction of demonic forces, the Imperial family will be forced to acknowledge the value of psionics, and this aligns with Adora's goal of maintaining world order. Currently, the number of demons on the continent exceeds all reasonable limits. In the Empire, the situation is still bearable, while in neighboring kingdoms, the elite is already completely under the control of darkness. If we use their intelligence and check everything properly, we will quickly be able to see that Rudian is telling the truth. Maria asked if demons had really penetrated so deeply into the human world, and the guy said that the Viscount was the head of the Serios trade union and controlled 20% of the imperial logistics. And yet he was just a puppet of demons, and did the girl still not believe him? Maria asked about the benefits of their alliance, and firstly, they would hand over all their data on demonic forces in the Empire without any conditions. Secondly, they will provide House Kepler and the Psychic Empire with the support of the most influential nobles and structures in the Empire. And thirdly, they will provide them with ancient knowledge on which the theory of psionics is built. Maria was delighted and couldn't believe what he had just said. Was he really going to reveal the theory of psionics? Adi said that this was all strange and asked if his master was sure that this would convince the girl, but he replied that she would not be able to refuse such a thing. The monster simply didn't understand the value of this knowledge because he had it since birth. But Adi's database contained many theories of psionics. It was this knowledge that gave me confidence in my negotiations with the Psychic Empire. In the original story, Maria possessed such power that even magicians could not compare to her, but the price to pay for the night was too high. In general, psionics lacks a systematic theory, which makes it extremely difficult to learn compared to universal magic. Moreover, a psionicist can only use the type of ability to which he is predisposed from birth. They tried for centuries to develop a theoretical basis, but the result ultimately came down to nothing more than a dependence on blood and innate abilities. Psionics theory is a cherished dream that can break down the barrier to the development of abilities. Hundreds of years of attempts? And here, finally, is a simple way to achieve what seemed impossible. They will not dare to give up. The theoretical works developed by the vanished empire of ancient psionics are now in the possession of the Adora organization. Maria's hands were shaking, and the guy asked what she thought about this and what she would do. Later, Maria returned to the Psychic Empire headquarters, and her brother came to see her, asking if she was okay. He said that this Rudian complicated everything, but they couldn't refuse. They didn't understand who he was at all, because according to the intelligence report, he was an ordinary person, literally no different from a commoner. Alvin couldn't believe it, because no normal person could control a powerful demonic sword and maintain their sanity. Possess a weapon capable of killing immortals. Only the ego sword sealed within a high-ranking demon possesses such power. An ordinary person would instantly lose his soul upon entering into a contract. Maria thought about Adora's organization and didn't understand what it was. They know everything about her organization, but they know nothing about them. Alvin said that for now, Adorp is in their sights. If they notice anything strange, they will eliminate them at any moment. Their secrets will be revealed over time unless they turn out to be enemies. The main thing is the benefit. Can Adora really deliver what they promise in exchange for an alliance? Maria said that they had a meeting with Rudian tomorrow, and that was the end of the conversation with her brother. Rudian decides that he needs to prepare for the main goal, to eliminate the Viscount, and this should be done after he has established himself in the capital. Since the man appeared earlier than expected, one must be prepared for the consequences, because now Rudian is still at the level where he can interfere with the original plot, and mistakes cannot be allowed. Rudian turned around and didn't understand why Nell and Del were sitting next to him, but the boy replied that they couldn't do anything about it. It was Maria's order. They were ordered not just to watch him, but to take him into their clan, and now they are allies. The real purpose is surveillance, but aren't Alvin and Karen from rival clans if Luciella tasked her with keeping an eye on the guy? If Karen saw this scene, there would be trouble, and suddenly Maria and Alvin approached him. The guy told Rudian to tell him who he was going to introduce them to. Rudian tells him to come with him, and then they will see everything for themselves. At this time, in the garden of the Morian Empire, Luciella greeted the prince and asked what the lady was doing there, because Viscount Belstad's daughter, Lady Citri, sat next to the boy, and she also greeted Luciella. Lord Kalain asked why the girl did not accept the lady's greeting. Luciella noted that she had not seen the girl for a long time, and for the first time since that ball. Kalin said that Luciella was probably overloaded with the task at hand and asked why she had come at such a time. The girl replied that she wished to report the murder of the Viscount and provided a report. Cullen snatched the paper with her seal and asked if there was any progress. She was happy that she received the paper, and it seemed that they would soon find out who killed Citri's father. She shouldn't worry. The traitors will definitely be found and her father's soul will be avenged, for which the girl thanks him. Luciella watched all of this very closely. At this time, Maria and Alvin came to the eastern part of the imperial capital, to a densely populated area where the guild headquarters was located. Alvin admitted that he thought they were heading to the villa from Kara. Was this aristocrat really so influential that he needed the help of the Information Guild? But it turned out not to be that difficult. Rudian said that, given how the meeting might go, it would be best not to mention the real names of their organization, much less the word empire, in front of the high nobility for now. Maria agreed that this was too much and admitted that it was a good idea. The guy approached the man and asked to arrange a meeting with the master of the Russian Information Guild. The man asked if he had had a prior agreement, and the guy replied that he should just say his name, Rudian, and the master would understand everything. After a while, the man returned, began to bow, asked forgiveness for not recognizing such honored guests, and said that the master wanted to see them. Maria and Alvin were shocked because the master's identity was unknown to the general public. They entered the top floor of the Information Guild headquarters, into the master's office. Alvin and Maria entered the room and were surprised. Luciella sat at the table among a multitude of papers. She greeted them and said that she was the master of the Information Guild, Luciella von Delphion. A little earlier, Rudian had visited the girl in the student council office, and she had greeted him happily. She was glad that this guy was doing well and asked if the dorm was causing any inconvenience, to which someone replied that everything was fine. He would live there all 365 days a year, to be honest, but maybe he was worried. What if they kicked him out one day, but could there be any inconvenience in such a place? Rudian noticed that the girl seemed to have more work, and she replied that an incident had recently occurred. The guy noted that the guild was probably currently overwhelmed with work, and the master had a huge workload on his shoulders. Luciella agreed that it was already difficult, and now there was such a big scandal. She interrupted herself and asked the guy what he had just said. He repeated that now a great responsibility lay on the shoulders of the master of the Information Guild, Lady Luciella. The girl immediately activated her sword, which became very large. She pointed it at the guy's throat and asked who he really was. Rudian replied that he was merely a former vassal of the young Lord Iskard and now a ward of the Delphian Foundation. And who would have thought that something as dangerous as this weapon was hidden in the capital? Then the girl asked another question. How did he know that she was the master of the Information Guild? Rudian said it was a rather controversial organization. You never knew when or where Imperial information would leak, but at the same time, the guild that traded in information operated under its own name. If business is done properly, it can generate enormous profits, but the Imperial family should not be directly involved in such matters. And it is even more impossible for a simple aristocrat to control such a resource as the Empire's information. Only the highest nobility, or rather even the aristocracy, connected to the ruling family. The only one who fits this description is a descendant of Imperial blood, whose line of loyalty has been proven over several generations, and also the third prince's fiancée, Luciella. Luciella said it was a clever guess and he was almost spot on. She added that it was just a theory and asked him one last time how he knew about all this. Rudian replied that a rather influential nobleman had disappeared in the capital a couple of days ago, and some of the papers that had just so spectacularly scattered were probably related to this very incident. He confessed that he was the culprit of this disappearance. The girl was very surprised, and he said that everything was so. He was the one who removed Baron Goodbelstad. The girl asked if he really wanted to say that the murder of a nobleman in the middle of a ball in broad daylight in the center of the capital was his doing. Rudian looked at her face and realized that she didn't believe him. Luciella said that the joke was certainly funny, but did he really think that she would believe him? He certainly has mana and is really skilled for his age, but it is impossible on his own. Rudian said that naturally, he couldn't have done it alone. Not a single student from the academy could have defeated a dark mage who had become a servant of demons. Seeing the girl's reaction, he realized that she still guessed that the Viscount was connected with demons. He asked if she wasn't curious how he knew who she really was, or how he figured out the existence of demons. Tomorrow he will explain everything to her personally in the guild, along with those who act in concert with him. Maria and Alvin were now standing in the room, the latter asking if the lady was really the master of the Information Guild, so that was who had been hiding under the guise of the guildmaster all this time. They didn't believe it was her, and the girl got up from the table and said that, frankly, she was just as shocked as they were. So they really did eliminate Baron Belstadt with their own hands. Rudian hugged Elvin and said that they had been hunting from the very beginning, and only recently had they managed to track down the demons that had infiltrated the Empire. The Viscount was a man who had been acting in the interests of the demons for many years, being their puppet, and they eliminated him after obtaining documents to prove it. Among this data, they found the name Luciella. The Viscount intended to expand the demon's influence all the way to the Imperial Palace, choosing the third prince as his means of influence. The plan was to use the prince, remove the girl from her position as the guild leader, and take control of the organization himself. He tried to do this by causing a quarrel between her and the prince by bringing his adopted child closer to his highness. Before the events of the main story began, Luciella was already the third prince's fiancée, and she was currently awaiting her engagement. However, in the original story, the girl was drawn into Good's intrigue, resulting in the prince breaking off their engagement and her losing her position as guild leader. Rudian explained that this was all intended to convey the truth to her, and a visit to the Information Guild headquarters with material evidence would undoubtedly be more convincing. Luciella replied that at first glance everything sounded logical, but there were two things that made her doubtful. First, how did he manage to detect traces of demons when even the Imperial Court and the Information Guild barely caught them? And how did they deal with the henchmen who had the evidence? Rudian said that both questions could be closed with one answer. That was the end of his part, and now the floor passed to his comrades. Maria introduced herself, saying that she was the head of the Psycho-Luminous Union, and expressed her joy at officially meeting them. Luciella was shocked that such a mysterious alliance existed in the Empire, and they knew nothing about it. Maria explained that it was not surprising. After all, there is not a single official mention of them in history. She added that this is simply an association of those who share one gift, psionics. The girl decided to demonstrate her power by lifting a chair into the air and declared that this was her magic. Then she snapped her fingers and the chair shattered into tiny wooden splinters. Luciella admitted that it was surprising, because she knew about the existence of such a power, but thought that it was a long-lost art. Maria replied that psionics were never inferior to magic, but only confirmed its reality. Luciella picked up the dark wooden ball and admitted that she didn't expect to see with her own eyes what should have remained in fairy tales, because perhaps they eliminated the Viscount with the help of these powers. If such psionics have united into an alliance, then it becomes clear why there is so little information about their existence. But they did not come simply to report this, they had to reveal their true purpose. Rudian replied that he understood everything and admitted that much did indeed seem suspicious. The three of them bowed and declared that they wanted Luciella to be their patroness. Luciella said that psionics should be recognized as equal to magic as a full-fledged branch of supernatural abilities, and Rudian added that their goal is to take a worthy place in the structure of the Empire and act within its order. They want to combine the fighting potential of psionics with the support of the lady. In this way, they will be able to effectively counter the demonic forces in the Empire, and at the same time attract Cattell. Luciella looked out the window and thought that they certainly had nothing to lose, considering that the rumors about demons in the Empire were being confirmed. And as if on cue, these very people arrived, strong allies capable of dealing with the threat. She stated that she could not resolve this issue alone, as it was too tempting an offer, which had come at too opportune a time, and therefore it was necessary to consult with the main house. Rudian replied that in that case they would wait for her decision. When they went outside, Maria decided to ask the guy a counter-question. She asked how he knew that the lady was the head of the Information Guild and whether there was anyone from the Imperial family in Adora. Rudian replied that he would prefer not to reveal all his cards, even to his allies. And he thought to himself that even if he wanted to, he had nothing to say, because sometimes you have to embellish things to avoid any doubts. In fact, they do not lack strength, but they lack the most important thing, political status. Because in the original, it was precisely because of the lack of support in the highest circles that they were doomed to the Yellow Academies. He told them to just watch, because he would ensure that Psycho Empire and his handful of people would be recognized as one of the pillars of the Empire. Maria didn't understand why this guy was giving them such support. Rudian thought that there were many reasons, but if he had to choose the most important one, it would be quite important. He believed that if they remained in the shadows and were unable to follow their own path, then only collapse would await them in the end. It would be unbearable for him to see all this. Alvin and Maria were surprised at what he was even talking about. While they have power and noble goals, in the regional plot they were merely victims created to offset the main characters. In fact, his favorite character is none other than Maria Kepler, who is standing in front of him now. At least one person in this world had to support them, so he told them to hold on, because he said all this sincerely and wanted to prove it with his actions. When the sky became dark and only the moon and the stars shone, a carriage drove by in which sat a girl who did not understand who was behind all this. She bit her nail and asked Seer if there was anyone she suspected. The demon apologized, saying that he hadn't been able to find the trail yet, but the girl noted that he knew how much time and effort they had spent to make the Viscount a high-ranking vassal. The demon replied that an official warning had recently been received from Rohan, and perhaps this was somehow related. The girl laughed. Could he really be talking about that Lich, the former court magician? And maybe he died. Castle Richmond was a key figure in the Rohan military, and reports came in that traces of his magical energy had been discovered in the Empire's border territory. She said he was foolish to hide his heart in those lands, to come up with a useless trick, and to end up dying so absurdly. They even brought in magicians, but found no traces. Apparently, spatial magic or an artifact was used, and she, as the ruler, would not tolerate unknown forces in her domain. She ordered the demon to find at least some traces of the enemy and report it to her immediately, and the monster disappeared, promising to carry out the order. Citri was furious because they had almost reached their goal, and whoever was behind this, she definitely wouldn't let them die easily. The next day, when the sun was shining hot, Rudian was in the Academy's training hall. He swung the sword and thought that he had at least 5 years before the start of the original story to reach the level of a swordmaster. Some school children were passing by, and one of them advised him not to overexert himself and go to a ball or something similar, because all the students would be happy to see him. Rudian admitted that, to his surprise, these people turned out to be not as bad as he thought, because he was prepared for contempt, but everyone turned out to be friendly. He thought that the nobles would be the same as Kalain, or it was Luciella's influence behind the scenes. Suddenly, Alvin approached the guy and noticed that he was training hard. Rudian wondered what he was doing there and wondered if Maria wanted to convey something. Alvin said he heard about the guy using mana during his fight with Karen. Although considering he wields a demonic sword, it's not surprising. Rudian noticed that it looked like there was a spy next to the girl. Alvin replied that no, because it was Karen herself who told him about it. He bought her one parfait, and she spilled the beans because they actually have a pretty good relationship. They had known each other since childhood and, as children, even made a vow to marry each other. But over time they grew apart when he began to lay claim to her place. Alvin couldn't let Maria bear this burden alone, so he took this path and became the Swordmaster's apprentice. If they can secure the support of the Ducal House of Delphion, then there will be no need for the title of Master's Disciple, and for this he is sincerely grateful. Alvin noted that Rudian had too many oddities. He wielded a demonic blade, but his movements with the sword were clumsy and his skill was blatantly immature. He held the sword in front of his face and said that it was precisely because of these contradictions that he could not trust him. Rudian just looked silently at his interlocutor and did not understand what would happen now. Maria was in her headquarters, where a man stood next to books saying that you can't trust those who hide their true intentions. Maria approached her father, noting that the theory about superpowers presented by Adora turned out to be genuine, and all the researchers agreed that it seemed to be from the distant future, not comparable to their work. But they parted with such a treasure easily, and the man said that there really was logic in her words. However, she must remember that in the entire 1,000-year history of the Psychic Empire, there was not a single one of them among those who sincerely sought peace. The head of the Kepler clan and the Psychic Empire asked the girl if she had already personally studied all the records. Maria replied that this was true, but that the man's emotions did not seem feigned to her. and the decision to cooperate lay with her as the leader of the union. That is why they are obliged to repay the debt, as honor demands. Even if Adora came with bad intentions, Matthias said that if she was so sure, then everything related to Adora was entirely her responsibility. The girl thanked her father, but the man added that if they really had such an advanced theory, then it all looked strange. He wondered why they would use the green world with such knowledge, which made Maria think. The 7 colored worlds are real-life dimensions, as well as 7 myth-level artifacts that grant colossal power. Among them, the green world symbolizes psionics and allows the use of powerful superpowers. At this time, Alvin told the guy that the very fact of his knowledge about the green world, information about which is stored in the main house, already says a lot. Rudian didn't understand what the problem was, and the guy said that it was serious because even among them, less than 10 people knew about him. Rudian understood everything because when he suggested using the green world, Maria was also shocked. He put his hand forward and began casting green magic, wondering if it was really that big of a problem. He had no intention of painting it, since Rosemary had already accepted the offer, meaning he had paid a rather high price while small stones began to fly out of it. They already knew that the psionic abilities obtained through the green world were only at the initial level. Alvin replied that even though they knew what he was doing was wrong, he still continued. The boy collected all the magic books from the Baron's office, and no one objected because they didn't need them. But when he saw Rudian luring away the green world's psionics, he sensed that he was gathering other abilities as well. Moreover, he is too well informed about the affairs of their family and union. He believes that allowing Rudian to draw them into his plans will sooner or later lead to disaster. Rudian understands that Alvin is willing to do anything for the sake of the alliance. He is striving for a great goal, and perhaps he is worth recruiting. He agrees that Alvin is right because he is indeed gathering strength and plans to master all the abilities available in this world. To do this, he needs as many allies as possible, like the main character Abel. He is confident that he will be able to prove his innocence and sincerity of intentions. If Alvin watches his every move, he will definitely get to know him better over time. Alvin didn't understand why he was saying this, but Rudian said that he simply wanted to prove the sincerity of their alliance. He thinks it's better than starting a fight right now. Alvin agreed with this and put away his sword, and the guy thought that they had a reliable ally. Alvin stated that he would keep a close eye on Rudian, and if he made the slightest mistake, it would all be over for him. But, however, the guy himself is not going to sit idle. After some time, when Rudian entered his room, he was in complete shock. Alvin sat on his bed and said that he had also decided to move into the dorm. Rudian asked if the academy didn't provide separate rooms, but the guy replied that there were no free ones left and the room was spacious, and he didn't see any problem with sharing it. He admitted that his skills were still primitive, but although he didn't know how Rudian had attained mana, he could speed up his training. Alvin didn't understand what kind of strange look Rudian had because, by the way, he was called the greatest genius of the academy. Due to the absurd power of the seas, he forgot that Alvin was the mid-boss of an entire chapter. Thanks to the special status of Alvin's psi abilities, his combat rating is off the charts, although his basic parameters are at the level of an ordinary knight. With such parameters, he really surpasses Alec, whom they fought last time. Although the Viscount was inferior to him in basic characteristics before turning into a demon, considering Alvin's age, he can truly be called a monster. Alvin said that sword training was just a secondary aid, and Rudian said that he would prove his case and that it was a mistake to consider him a mere observer. Rudian also added that help is always welcome, and he himself does not intend to stand aside. He sat down next to him on the bed and said that he had one plan and asked if Alvin could trust him and follow him. At their current level, approaching a demon would be like willingly climbing into the mouth of a predator. This means they need to find a helmet that will protect them, even if the tiger closes its jaws. After some time, Alvin, Maria, and Rudian came to the headman's office, where the girl said that she had been waiting for them. Luciella stated that she accepted their offer on behalf of Duke Vincent von Delphione. If their intentions are for the good of the family and the empire, then they will become a reliable support, lighting the way. After this, she turned to Alvin and said that since they had entered into an alliance, they had done something for him as proof of their intentions. Although it is unpleasant for Karen, Alvin will become their Uncle Keitel's apprentice. She then turned to Rudian and asked what his plans were now. The boy approached Luciella, causing her to blush, and said that the Baron was a minion of the demons, using their power, and this man gave his adopted daughter to the third prince. He emphasized that it was adopted, not biological, and asked if she understood what that meant. Luciella asked if he meant to say that she was also connected to demons. Rudian explained that they needed to find out whether the Baron's daughter was interfering in the affairs of the trade union, because if the new leader fell under her influence, she would become a key figure. Luciella replied that for a simple Baron's daughter, such influence on the trade union really did seem unnatural. Whether she is connected to demons or not, the parasite near the third prince must be eliminated. Luciella agreed and said that everything was correct. The parasites needed to be destroyed. Adi asked the owner who else was a real demon here, and he completely agreed with him. Luciella said that they needed to get back to the main thing and asked what to do next, because the demons had already penetrated deeply into the army and aristocratic society, but they would definitely bring them to light. First, you need to cut off all the tentacles, and to do this, you need to increase their strength by destroying one of the dungeons located nearby. This is a trap prepared in advance by one of the demon lords, and although the difficulty is high, it is quite possible to pass it, so they will manage. Luciella was surprised to hear that there was a dungeon nearby since they were in the capital. Rudian replied that to be more precise, it was located right inside the capital, where there were 3 known dungeons, 2 of which were not related to the demon and could be ruled out. He and Alvin will get inside and sort everything out. This is combat experience for Alvin, and a chance to get rare items and the elimination of a future threat. A real triple win. It would be a good place to start, and soon they find themselves in the Catacombs of Doom. Inside, they are met by skeletons and zombies that run, grind, and attack. Luciella easily kills everyone with her sword and laughs. Maria warns the girl that a Death Knight is nearby and is glad that the Lich has appeared. Finally, a worthy opponent. Maria runs forward, puts out her hand, and says that she will take care of it. Alvin asked Rudian if they hadn't come here for combat practice, and he replied that, under normal conditions, yes. But this place is special because there is something here that they are obliged to receive. Luciella had previously thought about the dungeon for a long time, and perhaps the very fact of its existence in the capital truly shocked her. However, the Gert House of Delphione is one of the ruling houses in the Empire, so this is not surprising. Luciella replied that this was extremely interesting information, and that the accumulation of negative energy in the cemetery had most likely naturally given birth to the dungeon. Just as the undead rise from the corpses on the battlefield, so the dungeon could have arisen, but the guy said that things are actually different. Luciella asked to take her along because she had been wanting to chop something for a long time, and this was a good opportunity. She will prepare everything necessary for passing the dungeon, because Rudian remembered that the girl prefers the sword to the pen. If she joins, the dungeon will be easier to clear, but the loot they want to get cannot be shared, and all plans will go down the drain. Alvin said that few people notice, but the lady is quite strong, and her help will be very useful. Maria warms up and asks to take her with her because she has been feeling lethargic lately and she needs to fight. Apparently, stress was taking its toll, and Luciella was delighted that she would finally see real psi abilities that she had only heard about before. Rudian was shocked by this company and doubted whether they would be able to complete the dungeon normally at all. Together they came to the north of Neva to the capital's catacomb. Luciella, holding all her weapons, said she thought this was enough for her. A mithril short sword, an artifact with a permanent light spell, a spatial bag with water and provisions, a pair of silver daggers, the girl looked full of enthusiasm. Her choice of an unusual short-bladed two-handed sword suitable for tight spaces speaks to her experience in dungeons. Rudian decided to ask whether it was possible to exchange an artifact or gold bars with magic for cash, and whether she had any good channels. The girl replied that their house could buy back artifacts made of magical gold if they weren't stolen. In limited quantities, although with large sums, this would be problematic. Rudian remembered the artifacts that Adi had stolen from the secret vault. Even one of them could fetch tens, if not hundreds of gold, and it was good that there was now a distribution channel. Luciella warned that the Kepler trading house was also quite large, and could they really be in financial difficulties if they had to sell even artifacts? The 3 of them looked at each other, and Luciella said that everything was clear to her. The 3 of them were not originally allies. These words greatly surprised Maria and Alvin. Luciella said that they would definitely explain everything to her later, but now they needed to move forward and lead the group. Rudian takes the glowing star and moves forward, and Adi notes that small lies are revealed instantly. They enter the room and realize that in such a huge dungeon there must be a crypt keeper, which means he was removed. Rudian, as an informant, is asked to explain everything, but he honestly answers that he does not know where the caretaker went and why everything is like this. It is a mass burial site for those killed in the previous war, and negative energy easily accumulates here, making it an ideal location for necromancers. Luciella asked if this meant the necromancer was guilty, but the boy replied that it was not. It was a creature from the borderland because, in the colored worlds, black symbolizes power over death. With the help of demons, a creature from the borderland came here, which they used and threw here. But as usual, the creature absorbs energy, raises the dead, and expands the influence of the borderland. Rudian was asked if the order team should be called, but someone said they could do without it, because why carry a bread knife when Maria, a weapon capable of slaughtering a bull, was at hand? Luciella said that was great, burst through the next doors, and declared that such creatures must be destroyed until there is a signal, and they went forward. The girl swung her sword gracefully, destroying enemies without much effort. A zombie knight appeared nearby, shouting that he would not take revenge and would not be able to close his eyes. Luciella cut off his head and said that they had already smashed the skulls of everyone who had tortured him, and now he could retire. Rudian noticed that the girl was destroying a death knight with a strength of over 2,000 in just 3 strikes, and wondered what kind of monster she was. Luciella said it was all just wonderful, and all the pent-up stress seemed to evaporate. The guy thought that he really liked her, and if it weren't for the underground cemetery, he would have been even more worried. But then they noticed that there were a hell of a lot of monsters again. Luciella said that quality has given way to quantity, and it's getting boring since there are no more death knights and leeches to be seen. Maria stepped forward and said she would lead the way. Since there are no worthy opponents, she will deal with them in one blow. She snaps her finger and a golden wave emanates from her, tearing enemies to pieces. Luciella compared it to a wave of high magic and thought that this was the true power of Psi abilities. Maria said it was nothing, and Luciella clapped back and said it was amazing. Rudian thought that if things continued like this, according to the laws of the Empire, Luciella and Maria would receive the lion's share of the rewards for completing the dungeon. He may give up one award, but he is obliged to take the second one. Suddenly, they heard the sounds of a creature from the borderland, reminiscent of a sheep's bleating. Luciella encouraged Maria and told her to go forward. Together, they ran into the next room, leaving the boys alone. They came in and were surprised, because they didn't know that such a place existed here, and after returning, they would have a lot to investigate. Maria said the place looked like the Colosseum, but Luciella thought it looked more like an execution site. Then the skeletons sitting around turned out to be not spectators, but executed prisoners. Suddenly, a monster appeared in the sky, screaming about how these people were cursed and how they knew he was here. Everyone realized that it was Baphomet, the minion of the Demon Lord. Maria said that one could guess from the sheep's bleating. But Alvin did not expect such a serious opponent. The sword in Rudian's hands began to laugh, saying that the passage through the portal had pretty much battered the monster's body. He looks whole, but in a normal state he wouldn't talk in front of a person. He has the Lord of the Underworld behind him, and he turns his nose up at even the Demon Lord himself. The sword claims that he is trying to seduce them with cunning and flattery. The first step towards them, and finally just 4 people, are ideal prey for him. The monster continued to scream, call the guests names, and threaten to destroy them. The sword finished speaking, warning that he was a master of curses and that people should be on their guard. The moment of his death is especially dangerous when he returns to the borderland, because then he can drag someone with him and the essence that he keeps must be taken at any cost. The monster screamed and flew towards them, swinging its sword. Alvin realized that even a light blow from such a sword could result in a fatal wound. Rudian stood at the ready, holding his sword in his hands, and the monster screamed at him to die. Maria immediately conjured a magical protective barrier around the guy. The monster hit the guy but didn't hurt him in any way thanks to the barrier. Rudian understood that if there was Maria's barrier, then the attack could be repelled. At that moment, Alvin and Luciella, who were also protected by magic, ran towards the monster. They ran past him, cutting his legs, causing the monster to scream in pain. Maria came down to earth and said that it was easier than she thought, but only because she was too strong. If Rudian had come only with Elvin, he would have used the demon's power. But in the current situation, that is not necessary. He looked at the monster's stats and was shocked by its strength. Its original combat power was 110,000. Maria said he looked like a possessed Viscount and looked like he was under severe restrictions, so they needed to get this over with quickly before it got worse. It seemed to her that the demon was guarding something. Perhaps he was guarding a magical ball that shimmered strangely and was located behind him. Rudian didn't understand what it was because there was nothing like this in the original, and he didn't feel any magic or spiritual energy. Maria said that whatever it was, they would figure it out after they killed the monster. At this moment, Alvin fought the monster one-on-one using magic. Luciella appeared next to her and said that it was a pity that she had not brought Giadelica with her. That was what she called her sword. Rudian looked at his sword, which was called Diablo, and decided that it was not for him to judge other people's tastes. Now it was time for him to enter the fight. He needed to plunge the blade straight into the heart because, according to the sword, the monster's magical energy should be very tasty. Rudian, if he can, will of course do it. The monster blocked Alvin's attack with one hand, while with the other, he tried to strike Rudian with his sword. In a normal situation, such pathetic brats wouldn't even become his opponents. He screamed that he would forgive no one, neither the damned demons who locked him here nor the vile people who tried to kill his sacred body. The servant of the Lord of the Dead dares to call himself a sacred body. This is ridiculous, and one cannot engage in combat with him head-on. Rudian said that before dying, the monster could cast a powerful curse, and Alvin and Luciella heard this and said that they would take it into account. Rudian ran forward towards the monster and said that we need to end this quickly. As the demon attacked him with the sword, a green protective barrier appeared around Alvin. He called Rudian because perhaps this demon was too strong for them after all. The two of them would have definitely died, but the guy said there was no time to complain. The monster was angry because this barrier prevented it from killing the uninvited guests. He understood that all this was being done by a human woman nearby, and she was really bothering him. Rudian asked if the monster really thought he would just leave him alone. He flew past and dealt it a multitude of blows, causing the monster to scream in pain and spit out green blood. The monster fell at its knees, raising a cloud of dust, and the impact cracked the floor. He was angry and cursed everyone, saying that he needed more time. Rudian said that they needed to finish him off while he was weak, because if he were at full strength, there would be no fight at all. Probably everyone except Maria would have died long ago, but the monster asked if this man really thought that he would simply disappear. He was originally supposed to be summoned to the underworld, but he put everything on the line and will not allow those who deceived him to go unpunished. He won't leave until he witnesses their fall. Rudian was surprised that even the demons interfered. The monster threw out its sword, which crashed into a pile of skull. Alvin didn't understand what the monster was doing, and the girl replied that it seemed he had decided not to fight anymore. The monster raised its hand up and then dug its sharp claws into its chest. Maria screamed for everyone to be careful because in exchange for his life, he removed all the restrictions at once. She immediately activated several magical barriers to protect her comrades. Alvin immediately realized that the monster was going to curse them. The monster screamed that he was giving up his life and the remaining magic. He asked to hear the call of this unfortunate mountain goat, and not to reject it, turning to the ruler of other worlds. Rudian, having heard all this, was very surprised. According to the plot, this part with the monster was from the original, from the 3rd chapter of Space War, where there is a battle with alien races. Although Baphomet appears little there, the guy should have understood why the 3rd chapter. This monster is either connected to aliens or is capable of summoning such creatures. The monster with a hole in its chest turned to the sphere that was flying nearby and asked for more creatures to be brought here. Dark magic began to form around the ball, filling the entire room. Rudian began to curse everything around him because he realized that he was caught. The sword in Rudian's hands warned that this was dangerous. The monster could not summon the Lord of Darkness, so it resorted to tricks. Most of the gods associated with this planet exist in other dimensions, making it extremely difficult to summon them. However, the beings from outside located in the same dimension, judging by the colossal energy, seem to be those whom the monster is now trying to summon. These deities have no particular connection to the planet itself, and if they appear, the situation could get out of control. Even Diablo's sword called it trouble, which greatly surprised Rudian. At this time, the monster continued to scream upward into the sphere, begging for the mysterious creatures to appear. Everything that was happening looked so ominous that no one present had ever felt such power in their entire lives. Maria screamed that the sphere could not be left unattended, and from now on she would not hold back her power. However, Rudian stopped everyone and said that the monster itself needed to be eliminated, not the sphere. He explained that improper impact on the sphere could cause a powerful explosion, and the monster confirmed that it was already too late. The monster mockingly stated that even if he was killed, nothing would change, and he would watch with interest as the power got out of control. Mary said in horror that if the creature that Baphomet wanted to summon appeared, even her power would not be enough. The explosion will destroy the capital, and if they don't stop what's happening, not only the Empire will perish, but the entire continent. Rudian agreed with her, assuring her that the continent would not simply perish. In response to this, Maria exploded with rage, saying that now was not the time for jokes. Rudian promised that he would make his way to the monster and plunge his sword straight into its heart. He said the blast would be terrible, but they would have to protect him. And Maria was shocked by his recklessness. For the first time, he saw the power of the afterlife and external energy with his own eyes. The sword laughed joyfully, saying that it seemed the boy had finally realized the full greatness of his being. Maria promised that she would try to protect him and cope. Then Rudian began to cast a spell on the sword and walked forward. He asked the sword how much time they had, and it replied that they had 1.5 minutes left. The guy was satisfied with this because 30 seconds on top was better than nothing. However, the sword added that if he wanted to truly control it, he must first become what is called a sword master. Rudian laughed and said that he would definitely become one. Approaching the monster, he said that all that remained was to wait a little. Every time he used the sword's magic, he felt as if he was shortening his life. The sword replied that it was indeed so, but wasn't it amazing to use such power in exchange for a piece of life? Luciella immediately noticed the presence of demonic energy. Maria confirmed her suspicions, saying that it was an unusual demonic sword, and she wondered how long the boy could maintain his sanity. Luciella asked in surprise if Rudian really had a demonic sword. At this time, Rudian fought with his sword against the force energy. But even in such circumstances, Mary's shield was able to withstand the blow. He broke through the energy and wounded the monster with his sword. The monster was shocked that the man was able to cut through his magical shield with one blow. He felt the aura of the sword and recognized who was standing in front of him. He couldn't believe it, because he saw how Diablo's sword was sealed by the Supreme Archangel at the end of the war. The demon in the sword said that the monster had been lingering in this place for too long, and if he had been there where he himself had been imprisoned, then there could be no forgiveness. With one blow of dark demonic power, he pierced the monster's throat. The monster screamed, asking not to kill him, and said to say hello to the Lord of Darkness. After that, he made one last sound and his head fell off, and Rudian couldn't tell if this was normal. Magic absorption turned out to be the sword's ability, and if some of the power were to go to Adi or Diablo, that would be concerning. After this, a sphere fell from the sky and broke. All that was left of her was a pile of glowing fragments, from which a beam rose upward. Rudian was glad that it was finally over, but the sword said that only one particle remained. Everyone looked up and couldn't believe what was happening. A huge gray monster with several heads, mouths in its palms, and many purple eyes appeared in the sky. Rudian couldn't figure out what kind of creature it was, since in the second chapter there were only aliens with multiple limbs. Sword said that this did not seem to be the one the monster wanted to summon, but that was even for the better. However, instead of the previous one, a much more dangerous monster appeared. Rudian realized that they were now up to their ears in problems and did not know what to do. The creature shrank a little and flew towards them. One of the heads began to speak in a completely incomprehensible language. Even Diablo's sword couldn't understand what the alien was saying. Adi translated that the monster looked here for fun and was not going to fight. Rudian was surprised that Adi could translate this because he himself looked like an alien. He asked Adi why the others couldn't see him, and whether it was even possible to translate. Adi replied that it was his ability to adjust the perception of those who could see him. He asked Rudian to ask the creature if it could change its appearance, since it should be able to take on human form. Adi said that he understood everything and flew towards the alien. Several tentacles emerged from it. It began to gesticulate actively and speak in the alien language. After this, she began to descend towards her master, explaining that this alien was only using this appearance, which was not his true form, but merely a crude imitation of the human species, and that he would now take on a more suitable appearance. Then the monster began to slowly descend, gradually melting and changing its shape. Gradually, he turned into a human, saying that human language was quite complex and it would take him some time to adapt. Now, in front of them stood a little girl who called Rudian the Chosen One, the Sealed One, or the Aled One, which she found quite interesting. The aliens call her Ev, and now she intends to follow them. Everyone looked at the stranger and was in complete shock. In the Chronicles of the Seven-Colored World, there should be no alien races or gods with such a name. The sword said that it has lived for a very long time, but it does not know the names of all the gods of the outer universe and can definitely say that it is not a participant in the great war of the heavenly demons. Moreover, the level of this creature is monstrously high. He's definitely not lower than Diablo and maybe even higher. Rudian is shocked that the level is so high that even the demon retreats and considers this complete nonsense. This guy is not from another dimension at all, but from an alien world. While she is behaving peacefully, she is capable of easily destroying all the plans that the guy has been working on for so long because she is a completely uncontrollable variable and declares that she wants to follow him. The demon said there was no need to worry because if a being of that level were to cause chaos, the heavenly world would inevitably intervene, and right now they were probably already in a panic and didn't know how to cope. Has the time really come when the demon lord will sympathize with the Celestials? What a strange turn of fate. Maria said that the lack of reaction from both the magic tower and other forces indicated that the black crystal served as a powerful barrier. Even Baphomet had to go into hiding while he recovered, and he apparently put a lot of effort into creating this protection. The core of the underworld serves as the key to gaining the power of one of the seven-colored worlds. The black, although there is no exact description. Abel, having defeated Baphomet, obtained the core of the black world, that is, logically, the very crystal, the key. Rudian, realizing that nothing can be done, takes the sword in his hands and walks away. He then uses a new magic with his other hand, pulling Baphomet's sword towards him. The weapon hits the floor in front of the guy and he orders it to shrink. At the same second, the weapon changes size, as well as shape and color. He gives the weapon to Alvin and says that it is a very valuable artifact and must be used wisely. The blade is capable of reflecting even aura, and its length can be changed at will. It also has protective properties and comes from the very depths. Alvin is very surprised to see the magic sword and is not sure if he can accept it at all. Rudian says that he already has his own sword, but Maria does not use swords. Luciella says that she already has a signature sword, and if Alvin wants to take this one, then let him take it. Alvin gratefully accepts the item and agrees. Although they obtained the core of Baphomet, they did not leave empty-handed. Even though most of the mana was purified, Baphomet must have been accumulating power for a long time. Now, in terms of mana level, Rudian is on par with a high-ranking mage or an elite knight. They decide that there is one last issue left to discuss. What should they do with this girl? She looked at them in surprise and did not understand what was going on. Luciella addressed her, and judging by her words, she now intended to follow Rudian. The girl said they could provide her with housing and a fake identity, but they don't understand who she really is, how great her power is, why she's after Rudian, and what her words to him mean. All this remains a mystery, but the most disturbing thing is her icy indifference, like a predator who is bored with its prey. Rudian turned to Ev and asked why she wanted to follow him. The girl said that she thought it would be fun. Rudian remembered that the sword in his hands, Diablo, had once said something similar. What does a supreme being with divine status feel when he looks at it? And perhaps the answer, I'm having fun, is not the worst option. In the last chapter of the Chronicles of the Seven-Colored World, among the deities there were indeed those who descended to the lower worlds for fun. Rudian sat down next to the girl and asked if she was going to interfere with his plans, and she replied that no, because otherwise it would not be interesting. And even if you do, it will be too cold. Rudian asked what she meant, and Ev replied that she wouldn't say. The guy said that if she wanted to follow him, she would have to comply with the conditions. The first is not to use force without his permission. Ev immediately agrees, and everyone is happy about this news. Secondly, no one should know about her presence. She must hide in such a way that under no circumstances could she be recognized. If the girl's level is truly one of the highest in the universe, then her discovery will attract the attention of other extraterrestrial civilizations. And if this happens, the entire carefully constructed system of Rudian will go to waste, and Ev agrees. At this time, a huge man with red hair tears up the paper, not understanding how it can be called a report. The man sat on the floor and apologized, explaining that the barrier created by Baphomet was incredibly powerful and they needed time to assess the situation. The man did not understand who dared to do all this because the documents were sent by Lady Luciella. He was shocked that a mere man had defeated Baphomet and was especially outraged that it was some stinking puppy that had barely left its mother's breast. The leak of information about Baphomet worries him, but the worst thing is that they didn't even notice how he was eliminated. If a human had actually killed him, the energy blast would have burned down half the capital, so they check everything they can and the man asks for a little time. He is perplexed as to why the girl hasn't dealt with Luciella yet. He turns to Asmodeus, who is sitting on the couch with two blonde boys next to her. She says that the girl did something wrong, but in the end it is her fault because her goal is the third principle, only it. She admits that Luciella is a nuisance that should be eliminated for the greater good, but trying to curb Asmodeus's antics is going too far. It would be better to find out how she managed to deal with Baphomet since the girl's combat power had long been thoroughly studied. She definitely couldn't have done it alone and so quietly, which meant there was a supplier. These people are definitely a nuisance to them. They threw all their resources into the investigation, but there were no leads and this turned out to be a good move for Eligos. The man says they plan to wait for Baphomet to recover and then immediately take away his power, but it is unclear whether this blow was targeted or accidental. Eligos shouts that this was, of course, an accident, because if people knew what they were planning, they would not have bothered Baphomet and would have struck in a completely different place. It seems they were just lucky because until now Asmodeus only pretended to be a rival, hiding behind a love Christmas drama, but now that Luciella has found herself in league with their enemies, she is constantly interfering with their plans. She will never leave this girl alone and decides to start with her surroundings. Near the Academy's main entrance, people greeted Luciella with delight because everyone had heard about the incident after which she received a medal from the Emperor. At this time, Rudian and Alvin were standing in the building, and he noticed that the girl was very popular. Lady Luciella, having accidentally noticed what was happening, dealt with the horde of undead together with the Knights of Delphione, and this became a rather successful legend. If their names were mentioned in official documents, they too would become famous knights, but if they were killed by demons, what good would the honor be if they were no longer alive? Rudian says that the results should be announced soon, referring to the identities of the mages who were involved with Miss Belstad. The girl from the Viscount's house, the only demon king to survive the first chapter, is the main antagonist. To prevent the downfall of Luciella and the Delphione family, now that things have gone this far, it's best to take care of this as soon as possible. Rudian asks Alvin how the consolidation of the criminal underworld is progressing, and he replies that with the support of the duchy, it has become easier, since with the departure of the Viscount, he is constantly expanding his territory. Rudian says that he must do his job well because in such places there are sure to be secret groups created by demons and their minions. The demon minions use the same method that was used to absorb the kingdom of Rohan, working from the bottom up, from the underworld to the aristocracy. In the original story, it was too late to fix it, but now everything is different, because the guy knows their methods and therefore can easily destroy them. However, this is not all, and one important question remains. How did they even manage to open the demon gates? The first place that the demonic forces captured was the neighboring kingdom of Rohance, but in reality, the gates of demons opened here, in the Mariana Empire. One thing is certain, they won't be able to open the gate right away, but it seems they are looking for something inside the empire. Maria runs up to the guys and greets them. She asks Rudian if she can take up some of his time. Now they are sitting together in a cafe and Ev is with them. The guy asks her if she has already chosen what she will order, but she cannot decide. He asks if he can choose for her, and Ev agrees. He points to one of the dishes and says that it must be tasty because it is sweet. Maria interrupts him and says that first he should at least apologize. Then in the dungeon, she had to somehow resolve the situation and promise to protect Rudian, but she was unable to do so. The guy realizes that without Maria's barrier, he wouldn't even be able to hit the monster. The girl says that if she had given it her all from the very beginning, she would have easily dealt with the monster without any risk. She believes that there was no reason for the undefined variable to exist, referring to Evie. Rudian noted that she was thinking a lot more than he thought, but in reality, she had done nothing wrong. Who would have thought that Goathead would refuse to backfire and self-destruct? It was just that the result turned out to be something that neither he nor Maria could cope with at the same time. Rudian asked her if this was really that important in their relationship. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about and asked what kind of relationship they had. Rudian smiled and said that they were colleagues, wasn't that true? She agreed that they were definitely colleagues, and perhaps even comrades, if one could say so. Hearing this, the girl became a little upset, and Rudian, noticing this, was surprised that she had never heard such words before. Maria had those in her life who guided her, but she probably never had colleagues who walked beside her. Rudian says that she probably could have handled everything on her own. Even if Baphomet in the catacombs had used all his power, she would have been able to defeat him alone. If she's so strong and something happens, it's understandable why she'd want to decide everything herself. She was good when they first fought the undead because, even without using all her strength, she could deal with them. But Baphomet turned out to be a completely different enemy. From the moment he attempted to self-destruct, Maria had to take responsibility and clean up the mess. That's exactly what the girl thought. Did he really not agree with that? But in his opinion, such a thought is incredibly arrogant. After all, in this world, to hold such a position is nothing more than arrogance and selfishness. Until now, she probably didn't have anyone she could call a friend or colleague with whom she could stand shoulder to shoulder, and so she pulled everything on herself. Maria was probably fighting alone all this time. As always, at the top of the kingdom called Psychic Empire stood the lone empress of the Kepler family. The problem was that this kingdom was a kingdom in name only, a house of cards full of holes. Only she could lead people. Only she could prove that psychic was a force superior to magic. Everyone said that she was their only hope, and only she could do it. Rudian asks to be allowed to ask her one question. During the fight with the Viscount, why didn't she allow Alvin and her siblings to participate in the battle? The girl replies that she could handle it herself, and Rudian asks how long she plans to continue like this. And what if an enemy appears that she cannot defeat alone? Will she really continue to fight alone even then? Of course, she hadn't encountered such an enemy yet, so she probably hadn't thought about it. But one day her powers might reach their limits. Among the enemies they will face will be those that even she alone cannot cope with. These enemies are not just demons, because in the grand scheme of things, demons are just an appetizer, and even the perfect Mary cannot defeat divine beings. Rudian extends his hand to her and says that they are colleagues, because colleagues are those who have the same goal and are walking the same path. Not all colleagues have the same skills, but even if they lack something, they are people who should walk together. She may shout when she is in a hurry and may blame when she is disappointed. Coworkers can also offer advice when the going gets tough and can tolerate her frustration. Maria didn't understand what he meant and asked what it all meant. Sometimes she wants to talk, sometimes she wants to be pampered, and sometimes she wants to go on a long journey. These are exactly the words that the melted Mary once said to Abel in the original story when she revealed herself to him. Even if Rudian wasn't born with the same strong abilities as her, one day Maria will have many colleagues who can support her. And the guy himself intends to take care of this. Maria suddenly spoke up, saying that these words resonated within her. But she listened to Rudian not as a colleague, but as a friend, because that seems to be a more appropriate word. She wouldn't like to be just colleagues, but wants to be friends. Although they belong to different circles, she offers to be friends at least as long as their alliance lasts. Rudian shook her hand and said that she was right, and he agreed to be her friend. Maria broke into a happy smile and asked him to take care of her. Maria admits that the real reason she came to apologize today was simply to assert herself and confirm her determination. If she stays there and goes back home to her family, she will have to take everything on herself again. At least when she is having a hard time or is exhausted, she hopes that Rudian can listen to her complaints and otherwise others can rely on her despite her respected position in the organization. Rudian agrees, saying that's what friends are for. But doesn't he respect her abilities, and can he really rely on her? This answer angers the girl a little, and she releases a force wave that shakes the coffee in Rudian's cup. And it seems like he just almost died. He hadn't spent time in such casual conversation for a long time, because he had lived too restrainedly after the devil stayed with him. He hadn't even spoken to the woman for more than 10 minutes. But now Maria gets up and says that she has to go to work, and perhaps her brother and sister are already looking for her. She says it was fun today and hopes to see you next time. Rudian understands that the Psychic Empire organization will have to be dealt with someday, because the reason Maria grew up like this is due to the inflated expectations and greed of psychics. But soon he will have a chance to do it. Ev eats all her ice cream and says it was very tasty. Rudian notices how her eyes are shining and is glad that she liked everything, and they decide to wipe her face. Ev says that the color of the soul has changed and become a little clearer. The fate of the destruction that many tried to avoid turned out to be very interesting, as expected. Rudian wondered if she also knew about the ending that Maria Kepler had ruined in the original story. This means that not everything was avoided, which means there is still something to be wary of. Rudian walked outside, happy to have become friends with Maria, a character from the original story who had always been his favorite. And the feeling was similar to being friends with an idol you admire. If the main story had started exactly like this, he wouldn't have even dared to dream about it. Maria Kepler, having completed her succession and risen to the top among true psychics, closed off her emotions for the sake of reviving the Psychic Empire organization, and wielded military power capable of overthrowing an entire nation. But when she succumbed to Asmodeus's pleasure, psychics, starting with magic, faced severe discrimination and persecution throughout the empire. It was only after the final battle with Abel that she opened the tightly closed doors of her emotions. But Rudian will not allow this nightmare to repeat itself. 3 demon kings have infiltrated the empire, disguised as nobles. Eligos is known for his mistakes even in the original story, so there is no need to worry about him, and Marbus is apparently outside the capital, hiding under another identity. The problem is Asmodeus, who is probably close to the 3rd prince, because any change in Luciella's situation could trigger her actions. Whether she will go ahead or try to use the prince, no one knows. Rudian turned to his sword and asked what would happen if he were to fight these 3 in his current situation, and Diablo replied that they were high-level demons who had attracted attention back in his era, and that over the course of 10,000 years, their power had become autonomous. No matter how much their power is sealed, at their current level, they are unlikely to be able to compete with any of them. But if their level rises, history may change. Rudian understands that he needs to improve his abilities as soon as possible, whether it be becoming a swordmaster or something else, because this will help him fulfill the role of a contractor for the organizer. They are not in a position now to use their military force recklessly, and at best it will all come down to an attempt to eliminate a subordinate, since it will be a battle of tactics and prepared moves. Citri Belstad is on stage now, and whatever she does, the guy will have to answer. Suddenly someone calls him and greets him. He didn't expect it, but now Citri is standing surrounded by the boys from his academy who are turning to him. Kalin shouts that Rudian himself is being greeted by Lady Citri, and can't he immediately bow his head? Rudian doesn't understand why the Lord ended up here, and didn't expect Asmodeus to appear at the academy in person, revealing himself so openly. The girl says she made a mistake and introduced herself first. Rudian claps her hands, realizing that this is the one who is said to be dating the third prince. Citri replies that these are baseless rumors, and, of course, they are not true. But in her heart, she thinks that he is trying to insult her honor right at the first meeting, and he has clearly crossed the line. Rudian believes that he is just an ordinary man with nothing to lose. Kalin runs forward, indignant at how he dared to believe such baseless rumors, and does he not have the sense not to spread lies about the lady? Rudian was even surprised that the third prince had remained silent until now and only now decided to speak. But they decide to leave this topic because the question is whether there is enough information about the demons for the royal intelligence, subordinate to the emperor himself, to be able to find Rudian. Citri joins the conversation, saying that she only transferred yesterday and therefore doesn't know much about this place, and Rudian asks what business she has with him. Kalayan doesn't understand why the young lady is being spoken to so rudely, since she is not a member of the royal family but deserves respect as an elder. The girl admits that she really enjoys stories of knightly valor, and she was even told that Rudian played a major role in the conquest of the dungeon in the Borderlands. And then the guy realized that all this was connected with Casley's death, the first trigger that began to distort the demon's plans. But he only laughs in response, saying that back then he was just an acquirer, and all of this became possible thanks to the outstanding military skill of the benevolent Kalayan. Thanks to this, the boy received the privilege of observing the Lord's skill up close. In reality, Kalayan did little more than pester and hinder the knights who were fighting in earnest. If he had a conscience, he would tell the girl the truth about Rudian's actions, but he is not capable of this. Citri grabs Rudian's hand and asks him to give her some time, because she really wants to hear stories of his valor. Rudian looks at her angrily and replies that he doesn't want to. The girl is surprised, and he says that he is very busy. The sword in his hands laughs and says that he hasn't seen such a sight for a long time. Kalian comes up, takes the girl by the hand, and tells her that she should leave the guy alone because she shouldn't waste her time on someone who doesn't respect the honor of a lady. Citri asks him to leave her alone, but he ends up pulling her along with him, and they both run away. Rudian can't understand how this girl even got here. Adi approaches him and says that he noticed something strange. He feels a part of his terminal from this woman. Rudian can't believe what he's heard. He senses a support terminal here. In the past, Adi talked about all of his terminals and how they were part of the 6 auxiliary parts created for him by the creator. Each one extracts unique materials, and each generation can use specialized terminal functions. And when all terminals are collected, the seal on its main body will be removed. But now the fragment means that Citri didn't get the terminal itself. And this is a relief. And he asks which of the 7 terminals exactly he is talking about. Adi replies that it is a first-generation terminal, a collectible type AI called El Dorado. At least it's not a combat type. And that's a relief too, since a combat terminal would have the power to cause the end of the world. Adi explains that El Dorado's purpose is to collect subspaces, and his terminal is filled with artifacts collected by the creator in the past, but most of them are locked, and only he can open them. However, the main part of the terminal, depending on how it is used, can easily destroy a planet or even 2. All of this is connected to the enormous power of the terminal itself, and Rudian will need to urgently develop countermeasures. The reason why the Demon Gate could open in the Mariana Empire was because of Adi's terminal, El Dorado, which was given to Asmodeus. The common thing between these 2 events is that they were both described in the original story, and the question remains whether this was a coincidence or not. But Rudian will still have to give that girl a good shake. At this time, Alvin and Maria were in Luciella's office, where she reported that Citri had transferred to their academy, and the third prince was personally behind this. The official reason was that Citri's father had gone missing, her family was on the verge of falling apart, and the third prince had taken over her family's affairs, leaving only one distant relative who was supposed to be under the academy's protection. Maria asked if there was any resistance from the imperial family, as the prince's interference in the affairs of a noble family looked suspicious, especially considering the Belstad family's colossal fortune. Luciella noted that everything that was happening seemed like a game. Maria was relieved to find that she was told that nothing of the sort was the matter, and was asked to take care of the lady and treat her properly. The Delphionia family could easily arrange the assassination of a member of the royal family. Maria is sure that they probably have only one goal, They will want to enjoy the young lady in a special way. If they want to start pursuing her, let them do so. Suddenly, someone entered the room and said that it really turned out well, and everyone turned to see Rudian, not understanding why he said that. He explained that Lady Belstad was just a title, as she was only the Viscount's adopted daughter. Maria confirmed that this was indeed the case, and noted that this meant that the only one who could take control of the Saurus Merchants Union was Citri. Rudian was thinking about how to approach her because she was stuck next to this prince, and therefore everything was working out perfectly. They have a chance to absorb the Union of Saurus Merchants, and isn't that a great opportunity? The Saurus Merchants Union is the largest trade guild consisting of over 300 branches across the continent, uniting 3 major guilds and 8 secondary guilds. They have amassed such vast wealth that they control 20% of the empire's logistics, and if they go on strike, the capital will be paralyzed. This is one of the key areas of wealth not only in the empire, but on the entire continent, and Alvin sees 2 problems with this. Firstly, he noted that the takeover of the Union was practically an impossible dream if one were to proceed through the standard acquisition of shares within the Merchant Guild. In terms of capital, even the combined efforts of the Duchy of Delphione and the Kepler family will not produce the desired result. And secondly, if Citri really is connected to demons, would she have entered the academy without a well-thought-out plan? Rudian understood that everything the guy said made sense because Asmodeus was the one who was plotting behind the scenes. She probably has someone acting on her behalf, perhaps the third prince or someone else, but she wouldn't have come without countermeasures. The most important thing now is that they need to absorb the Saurus Traders Union, and to complete this task, according to the rules, it will take more than a day or 2. Alvin noted that the guy was right, because less than a week had passed since the Viscount's death, and Citri had already been transferred to the academy, and this aroused suspicion. Rudian asked, if they assumed that Citri had taken over the Merchant Guild, what method could she have used? Maria, without thinking, said that she probably did it by force. She must have suppressed them with her power, because the guild leader is always the one who is strong, and there is no place for honesty there. Add to that Asmodeus's unique powers of brainwashing, threats, and mercy, and she could unite the guild in no time. Alvin noted that their task then becomes to free those who are threatened by demons in order to attract them to their side. Rudian stopped him and said that this was not the way, which surprised Alvin. After all, if they free people they don't even need, then why do it at all? Evan asked what he was going to do then, and Rudian replied that he would indeed absorb the Saurus Traders Union. To do this, they must take control of the core, the Belstad family. Luciella tried to stop him, asking how he was going to do it if Citri was already in the family. Rudian explained that he had a trump card. She was only an adopted daughter, not a biological heir. Strictly speaking, her right to inheritance was recognized only because the Viscount had no relatives left after he sold his soul to a demon and killed all his loved ones. Thanks to the third prince's participation, most people didn't even dare to approach. However, if they don't have any relatives, they can simply create them. As he placed the ring on his finger, he said that they had a ring that symbolized the head of the Belstad family. Alvin was shocked, not understanding how he had managed it all, and Maria guessed that Rudian had stolen the ring at the moment of the Viscount's death. The guy said, Rudian Belstad, doesn't that sound plausible? Of course, he is not going to head the family, he will only be a nominal president. Luciella noted that even with the head's seal, it would be extremely difficult to pull off such a scam. Rudian didn't understand what the problem was because they had a person with a high reputation who could certify the seal, and if the Delphione family got involved, it would mean a conflict with the supporters of the third prince. He looked at Luciella, wondering what decision she would make. Without thinking twice, the girl said that it was a great idea. She mentioned her father and main family. Joining the Saurus Merchants Union will be a great gift. Newspapers flew across the streets with headlines about the appearance of the heir of the Belstad family and the confrontation between the Delphian family and the third prince's faction. The nobles began to take notice of the unexpected clash of the titans, believing that this event signified a rift between the Duchy of Delphione and the third prince. Callan was overcome with rage and slammed his fist on the table, not understanding what was happening. He laughed and exclaimed how Duke Delphian could allow himself to do such a thing, and immediately went to find out. Citri ran up to him and calmed him down, saying that if he took even one step, the situation would escalate. Callan asked what he should do then, and the girl said that she would go and talk to a man named Rudian. If there was a misunderstanding, it could be resolved. Perhaps everything would go smoothly because she had already checked the information and knew that a crazy murder could ruin her plans. If he desires the Belstad family, she is ready to give it to him. However, first she will use the power of lust to subjugate him. After some time, Citri arrived at the main building of the Imperial Academy and met with Rudian again. She said that the outside world was full of noise and there was no point in fighting over the family inheritance at a time like this. Rudian thought about how absurd it all was because both of them were claiming rights to a family without having a drop of its blood. Citri said that she could give him the post of head of the Belstad family, but in return he will have to promise that he will belong to her. Rudian was surprised and did not understand what she was talking about. Citri licked her lips and was glad that the guy didn't fall for her trick. She approached him, and wings appeared behind her back. She added that it wasn't just the head of the family's wife that was being discussed. Didn't he want to take possession of Luciella and destroy her completely? If Rudian wants, he will become hers, and she will make Luciella his slave, because she can give him everything: status, honor, money, and pleasure. Rudian removed her hand from his face and said that she was probably just joking with him. The girl's face distorted with surprise, and Rudian repeated that she was completely carried away. She jumped back from him, not understanding what was happening, because the Demon King's power should have been absolute and should have affected him. Rudian started laughing, saying how stupid her expression was, and Adi pointed out that compared to today's demon ball, it was a mere trifle. Citri asked him at the theater who he really was if her power had no effect on him, whether he was a dragon or perhaps a goddess. The guy said that now everyone asks him about his identity, and even she speaks the same way as that girl. He tried to remember her name and said it was Castley Richmond. Citri immediately recognized the name and realized that it was Rudian, the one who broke the bloody demon stone. She realized that she had fallen for it, because before her was an opponent on whom the power of lust had no effect at all, and she would not be able to kill him even if she mobilized all her strength. Rudian sat down at the table and invited her to sit down too, calling her the Demon King Asmodeus, remembering what she had to go through with the other demons to open the gate. The girl's face distorted with anger, and she asked who he was if he knew not only her identity, but also the names of all her minions. Rudian couldn't even imagine that the demoness would come looking for him in this way, and added that his identity didn't matter. What was important was to get to the point. He offered her an alliance because until the demon gates were open, everything she did might be useless. It would take at least 3 or 4 years to open the gate, and Citri was shocked at how much this man knew, including their internal affairs. She didn't know how strong this man was, but even if she had to sacrifice her life, she had to kill him right now. Rudian asked if she really wanted to make such an extreme choice, but suggested that she give it a try. In any case, once she did that, everything they had built with the demons would collapse in an instant, and Citri asked what he wanted. Rudian replied that he had already said this before. He wanted to create an alliance. The main thing was that they would be the first to enter his territory, and that she would stop getting on his nerves. Perhaps she is under a delusion, because in fact the territory he speaks of does not exist. He added that the demons would open the gates anyway, and it wasn't that difficult to communicate with them, but it was much more difficult with other kingdoms. Therefore, they demand appropriate compensation from the demons for the damage, and from that moment on, they need to determine their territories as suitable in order to remain non-aggressive. Citri remained angry and asked what proper compensation he meant. The guy replied that everything was simple, but he himself thought that she had taken the bait. The first condition is to hand over control of Belstad to them, and while that may be financially inconvenient now, once the demon gates open, it will no longer matter. The second condition is not to touch Delphion's family, because he needs to maintain his social status in human society. Citri asked if these were all the conditions, but the guy added that he needed something else. He wants the girl to let Kalain go because Rudian was his squire and does not want to see his life ruined. If the demons complied with all these conditions, the guy promised to keep silent about them, and Citri believed that they had invaded her territory and interfered in Belstad's affairs. She understood that she could not refuse the offer because the information this man knew could not be obtained in the usual way. The only thing that could be said for sure was that he had deliberately provoked her to create the situation. Citri said that in the name of the Demon King of Lust, Asmodeus, she accepts his demands. Rudian noted that he liked her straightforwardness, but Citri stated that there was more to it. She won't let the third prince go because she has spent too much time on him, and he does not belong to the Delphione family. Rudian realized that if he put in more effort, he might be able to bring back the third prince. But he doesn't want to particularly care about the one who abandoned him and ignored Luciella. He noted that the territory of Delphione and Iskar does not touch the families in which demons are hiding. Citri said that they would not touch Maha Academy until the demon gate was officially opened. She asked the guy what she should call the organization he was involved in, and Rudian replied, Adora. Citri said that the awareness of the existence of those watching them is a gain in itself. However, she added that his pride would one day make him pay for it. Rudian asked if she was overdoing it and what they were going to do if he broke his promise. Citri said that since he himself gave the covenant with his lips, the moment they broke it, they would receive a huge backlash. She added that she would hardly be the one who would not know anything if this happened. But the guy considers himself too insignificant for anyone to react to him seriously. The girl said that they could look forward to the moment when she would make him her slave and torture him forever. As Citri left, Rudian said he was looking forward to it. He may have shown too many of his cards, but it was enough for the bluff to work. Adi asked the owner if he really intended to make a deal and not attack. Rudian didn't understand why he needed this because great beings can be bound by words, but he is not a great being. Adi joked that he wasn't sure who the real demon was, and Rudian said that he was a human, tricking the Demon King. At this time, Elagos was shouting at the girl, asking if she had gone crazy if she decided to conduct business on her own without his and Marbas's consent. Asmodeus told him to shut up and leave because he already knew every detail of their plan. Rudian even knew the exact time the demon gate opened. And not only that, but also Marbas's identity, meaning he might also know about the core they found. But it seems the guy has no intention of taking over the world because, despite feeling the aura of a dragon, She believes that he is not a dragon. This man's aura was at the level of an ordinary person, but the enemy's strength was real, and the ability to read all of this was astonishing. Perhaps he belongs to some alien species or is even a goddess, but the girl is not sure. Eligos screamed, were they really just going to stand there and do nothing? Because his pride wouldn't allow him to ignore the threat. Since this guy is so knowledgeable, who knows, maybe he's capable of striking, in which case it is better to take the risk and destroy him. Citri replied that the man was crazy because they knew nothing about the extent of Rudian's power, and he already wanted to attack blindly. Eligos considered it all a bluff, because the girl had made a covenant in her name, and if he took a step, it would not be a violation. Citri realized that her comrade was a madman. She explained that there were two conditions. Firstly, they must never meet in the capital. Regardless of victory or defeat, everything will be destroyed, and secondly, if he loses, she will consult with Marbas. In that case, Eligosa would be expelled, and he was very surprised by her words. If he doesn't accept all the conditions, Citri will tell Marbas everything, and Eligos will be sealed until the demon gate opens. Eligos agreed to these conditions and accepted them. The girl left in a rage, telling him to do what he wanted. At this time, in the Duchy of Delfione, people were trying to stop the third prince, who was trying to break into Luciella's room. The father came to the noise and asked the prince to calm down, but Kalain shouted that the man had crossed all boundaries. He came to interrogate him decisively, but he showed disrespect. Kalain believes that the Delfione family has gone too far in the affairs of the empire, and they must have a good reason. Vincent opened the doors and told the prince to do whatever was necessary. Kalain burst into Luciella's room and saw her sitting and drinking tea with Rudian standing next to her. The girl greeted him and asked him to come into the room. Callan, demanding an explanation, did not understand what kind of strange joke this was and why Luciella threatened Citri. Luciella calmly replied that she had never met the girl and continued to drink her tea peacefully. Callan wanted to scream that the girl had come out and declared her intention to meet with Rudian, and then suddenly said that she would give up all her rights if they did not intervene, and how could they think that such a thing was possible. Luciella turned to Rudian and asked the guest to explain everything. He introduced himself by saying that his name was Rudian Belstad. Callan was extremely surprised by this, and he could not understand how an ordinary person dared to say such things. The boy asked the Lord when he would finally grow up. The prince got up from the sofa and started shouting, asking who gave him the right to behave so impudently. Rudian said he didn't understand how he could be so indifferent, even after the Delfione family, their sponsors, had turned their backs on them. And did he really think he would simply take control of the merchant union? Callan couldn't understand what kind of nonsense he was talking about, because the power and wealth the Viscount had amassed in the political world were far beyond their comprehension. With their support, he no longer needs unwanted interaction with the Delfione family. If they do not want to become enemies of the imperial family, then they should hand over the seal of the head of Belstad without resistance. No matter how powerful the Delfione family is, and whether they are part of the three great houses, they cannot stand against the imperial family alone. Rudian said that this was only true if he was alone, but what would happen if two families united? At that moment, he asked one person to enter the room. Kalain immediately recognized the guest and could not understand what he was doing there, and the stranger said that a lot of time had passed since their last meeting. Kellen asked Grey Bellatrix why he was here. Bellatrix is one of the three great ducal houses of the Empire, a prestigious family of mages who oppose the swordsmen of Delfione, and he is the young lord of this ducal house. He is also the person in charge of magic in the protagonist's team in the original story and holds the title of a legendary archmage called the God of Magic. Grey noticed that the prince was still as ignorant as before. The day before, Rudian had told the girl that they had formed an outer alliance with the demons, and this had given them some time before they dared to invade Delfione's territory. Luciella admitted that there was one serious problem connected with Viscount Belstad's family. Rudian took the documents and couldn't understand what she meant until he heard that the Belstad family had almost no wealth left. The girl explained that after the Viscount was officially declared dead, his property was seized without permission, and according to the Information Guild, not even 30% remained. Rudian needs shares in the Merchant Guild to take up the position of Guildmaster, but Luciella said that even help from the Delfione family would not be enough. The guy said that in the current situation, if they go against the Imperial family and gain territory, the Delfione family will inevitably face great risks. So he suggested bringing in another family instead. He remembered the girl telling him about a way to destroy loot in the dungeons, and asked if this was the same mage who existed in the Fire Magic Tower. Luciella asked how he knew about this and who he was, but the guy said to just accept it as it is. They are going to bring Bellatrix's family to the capital. Together they headed to Bellatrix's family estate, where they found themselves in Grey's office. The boy looked at them in surprise, recognizing the young lord of the Bellatrix family, and asked what brought them here. Luciella began to say that she hadn't been here for a long time, and the guy listened to her attentively. Grey, as in the original story, is the ultimate narcissist, not because of his abilities, but because of his undying love for himself, and is a character that is impossible to hate. Luciella stopped bowing to him and said that his habits remained the same, And Gray replied that she should not expect kindness from Bellatrix's family, and it would be better to immediately explain the reason for the visit. The girl said she would get straight to the point. She had come to propose that Delphione and Bellatrix join forces to invest and take the position of head of the Merchant Guild. Gray asked if they really wanted to split the Merchant Alliance, even though their third prince was doing everything he could to absorb it completely and win the fight for the title of Crown Prince. Luciella became sad and said that certain circumstances had arisen, and Gray replied that you didn't even need to look to understand that this mad lord was digging his own grave. Despite the enormous benefits, Gray refused the offer, as they could not afford to spoil their relationship with the imperial family. Luciella said that if their two families united, even the imperial family would not be able to interfere without consequences, and a portion of the shares would be offered to them. Gray said that their family's profit and the threat from the imperial family were equal to about 50%, and if they wanted to convince Bellatrix, they would need to offer more. Rudian took something out of his cloak and said that he had something that Gray would definitely want to see. The boy immediately recognized the gold bar filled with mana with very high purity. Rudian said he wanted to liquidate him and asked how much Gray could value him, to which he replied that they had come to the right place. Gray examined the ingot carefully and said that he could pay about 200 gold pieces for it, which surprised Luciella, since for that price one could buy a mansion with a garden in the capital. Gray said that neither he nor the elders of the magic tower could process it to that extent, and assumed that it was stolen goods, after which he asked where the guy got it. Rudian admitted that he robbed a dungeon but could not say which one. If he had said that this was the dungeon of Kesley, Count Iskar would have immediately gone there with the Knights of the Order of the Lionheart. Gray said he wouldn't ask the source and was willing to pay 200 gold pieces for the ingot now. Rudian said that this is not all he wants to sell, and he has something else. He ordered Adi to bring out all the treasures he had, and the monster's eyes lit up. A stream of gold coins emerged from the portal, filling the entire room. Gray began to examine the metal objects filled with mana and noticed that there were many rare materials there. Rudian realized that Kesley had truly amassed an insane amount of wealth. Gray said that for that amount of money they could easily buy the title of Vint with its own territory, and asked if he promised to sell it all at a reasonable price, whether they would be willing to cooperate with him and the Delphione family. Gray added that he would have to convince his family. Rudian said he believed he needed to make a deal. He handed him the book and asked how about it. Gray immediately recognized the magic book from Richmond School, the author of which was the legendary Archmage. He asked if he really wanted to sell it to him, and if so, he was sure that with this book he could solve his previous problems. Rudian winked at Luciella, and she asked in surprise when he had figured out how to appease him. Colin said that no matter how they united, they would not be able to overcome the power of the imperial family. Gray apologized for interrupting their conversation, and said that their enemy was not actually the imperial family. Kalayan already knew that their family supported the second prince, and that he had been given a share of the trading union. The prince was pleased and said that he would help, which made Kalayan extremely angry. Gray said that Kalayan could leave his fiancée and live peacefully with the mistress he had found. And if he continues to act the way he has been, Gray will not allow him to remain that way. An angry Callan left, shouting for them to wait because it would definitely not end like this. Afterwards, Gray asked if it hadn't worked perfectly. Rudian realized that the most interesting part was just beginning.